All right, guys. Thanks so much for clicking on the video. Episode 14, actually crazy that we've gotten this far. We've come so far. Thank you to our 26 subscribers as of Wednesday, March 26th. Fantastic. And we got a great episode today. We're going to talk about several stories. Number one is going to be this signal leak controversy that kind of popped off a couple days ago. I mean, depending on when we upload this, it might be a little old, but it's brand new for us. We're going to talk about the signal leaks and what's going on there. Then we got some conversation going on about the cultural shift among Gen Z men, and also the kind of reversed phenomenon going on among Gen Z women. So that's in there too. We're also going to talk about JD Vance. We're going to kind of zoom in on this guy, right? Because last episode, maybe it was 2 episodes ago, we sort of talked about how JD Vance is becoming like the face of the Republican Party in a way. I mean, it's still Trump, right? For sure, it's still Trump right now. But in terms of the future, I think he's the guy. And I think we have some good conversation about that coming up. So I'm excited about that. And lastly, we're going to talk about the executive order that Donald Trump signed to close the Department of Education, where that fits into, like, for example, the Doge cuts and things like that. So we're going to kick it off with the signal leak controversy. This is what's been going on lately. So I'll let you go ahead and summarize what happened. So walk us through it. Where are we at with that?
All right. So for us right now, we're just processing this stuff, and again, um, this there was a group chat on Signal with some high profile individuals, and somebody was accidentally included in that. I believe his name was Jeffrey Goldberg, and so already before getting into the summary, I'm gonna put this question out there before. So this is a question that's gonna be in your mind while you're listening to the summary. It's, why would Jeffrey Goldberg release this stuff instead of saying, "Hey, I shouldn't be in this group chat"? Let's talk about that later, but put that in your mind now.
Yeah.
Now knowing that, let's go forward. So there was a group chat there involved, and Pete Hegseth was in it. Um, we obviously JD Vance was in it, Michael Waltz, a couple other individuals, but these people were discussing strategy. They were discussing strategy on how to, handle a little bit of
The
war,
Houthis.
kind of Houthi situation, a Houthi strike.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of high profile individuals in here, and there's controversy about it because it was leaked, and then there's also controversy about it because, well, hey, how are these people talking about war in a way that, it's so kind of laissez-faire? Some people are saying, and we'll get into that. We'll get into all the criticisms here, but I'm just going to give you guys
Yeah.
some quotes from the leaked messages. Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. He's just giving updates. F-18s are launching, trigger based, etc. Strike drones on
Yeah.
target. This that. It's details of stuff that's going on, and then more to follow. And then
Yeah, and we can like add these, by the way, so we can maybe
yeah,
if you want to add these in post, so you can look at these. But
yeah, we'll put them up.
yeah, sorry to cut
No,
you off.
you're good. And so it's kind of ironic because he does, in this first sentence, he does say, "We are currently clean on OPSEC." Well, spoiler alert, you're not clean on OPSEC because we're talking
Yeah,
about these messages. So you didn't
not
do your
quite.
due diligence there on
Yeah,
OPSEC. So I'll do a whole video
yeah,
on that, I'm sure. But okay, so it's them talking about that, and then JD Vance kind of saying, "Hey, I will say a prayer for our victory." So it's just kind of a wholesome, hey, you know, pray emoji. It's like when you're on the group chat in Slack, hey, let's work on this situation, and then the pray emoji comes out. It just makes it legitimate, right?
yeah,
Michael
yeah.
Waltz response with some, like, a lot of this stuff's mundane. This is the thing. Like, we're gonna talk
It
about this.
is.
We'll put it up on screen, but we'll talk about it. But there's nothing in here. I'm just gonna scroll down it. Like, there's really nothing in here. Good job, Pete, and your team. Good job, and everyone's great work, powerful start. Good job. That's everyone's saying and stuff. And so
Yeah,
I even looked for controversiality in here, and, like, I guess the most controversial thing that I found was JD Vance saying, we need to figure out how to stay on message here, but that's really just
yeah.
him describing how to strategize about the messaging here. So I will kick it back over to you because that was a poor summarization, but I feel like I feel like you could re-summarize it and then
Yeah.
kind of we'll get into it.
No, I mean, I think you covered it, the big points pretty well there. I mean, and here's the thing: the screenshots that we're looking at that I posted in like our notes here that we use, these are the most controversial ones. That in my view, anyway. I mean, there are more. So, what we're looking at is these texts, and we'll put them on screen so you're looking at them too. These are the texts that were initially withheld from the initial report. So the dude who posted the story in the Atlantic was, you mentioned him, Jeffrey Goldberg, who is a well-known sort of not a good guy reporter. Like, he's basically been involved in a number of national security hoaxes over the year. Weapons of mass destruction. That's all that guy had. It had Jeffrey Goldberg's name all over it, for example. But Anyway, so he was added, and he's the one who wrote this story in the Atlantic. And initially, he posted a bunch of text messages that were really just totally mundane, like you said. I mean, and we could put those up too. I didn't even bother putting them in the doc because they're just not controversial at all. It's just basically a group of people, high-ranking people. I mean, I think the names we have here are Tulsi Gabbard, who's the director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, Kash Patel, FBI, and Pete Hegseth, who's the defense secretary. And then there's a couple other names, I think Stephen Miller, who's like one of Trump's closest advisors, and Michael Waltz, of course. He's sort of the guy who caused all of this because he's the one who accidentally added Goldberg into the chat, which is kind of my main question on that, and we'll get to that in a second here. But it's basically these people who are high-level Trump administration officials, basically just talking strategy, but at a very high level. It's nothing, it's almost like it's a casual chat. And you would expect that, at least I would expect that, since they're using Signal, right? This is not an important conversation.
Right.
If it was a very important strategic conversation, it would be happening in what they call the skiffs. You know about the skiffs?
Yep.
Yeah. So for the viewers, that's basically when you have a high-level security clearance, they literally build a room in your house, which is like secure. You're not even supposed to bring a phone in there, and that's like where you have like super strict high-level secret.
That's where the homies go down there. Like the homies would go, hey, let's go to our skiff, right? And then you go down there and talk about, hey, what am I going to procure for this weekend and how we're going to do it, right? So you probably do this in real life. You'll say, hey, all right, Mom, hey, I'm going to go outside and talk to my buddy here. And then you'll go outside, and you and your buddy will start saying, hey,
that's a skiff.
That's a skiff, right? So we all have skiffs in our life, and that's probably where they were.
You're familiar with skiffs.
When they were detail oriented and like doing the detail stuff on this, like super details, it was done in a skiff, I assume. The only sensitive stuff I would say would be like the beginning, that team update, time now, weather is confirmed for a go. I would say that being leaked could be, if somebody saw that.
Just for context. So that message, and again, this is the most controversial part right here, because it is something approaching planning. Right now, maybe not even planning, because the plan is already in motion, but they're just sort of giving a timeline. But that's all it is. If you can look at this, I mean, they say the time now is 11:44 Eastern. Weather is favorable. Just confirmed with Central Command we are a go. At 12:15, the F-18s will launch. That's the first strike package. And by 13:45, so that's 2 hours after this text message has been sent, that's when the first potential strike window is open, and that's based on whether they have if they're able to see the person that they actually want, then that's when the first bombing will happen.
Right.
But guaranteed the bombing will start by 14:15, which is 2:15. So maybe, what is that, two and a half hours post whenever this message was sent. So basically, worst case scenario, if this message gets leaked, then the Houthis have 2.5 hours. Now, again, that's worst case scenario. It gets leaked directly to them the moment he sends it. They have 2.5 hours to sort of like get ready to get hit. Okay, there's no information on where they're going to get hit. There's no names about who's going to be targeted. And these are attacks coming from the sky, right? We're talking about Houthi rebels. Okay, let's be honest for a second here. Like, what are they going to do about an F-18 strike coming their way, right? Probably not a whole lot. So they're going to, again, worst case scenario, they have 2.5 hours to turtle up. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that that's good. Like, I don't want that. Obviously, that's not good. This is a failure of operational security, which is why we're talking about it. But again, that's the worst case scenario, right? It's the worst possible thing that could have happened.
So you gave the charitable view, and the most charitable kind of Steelman to this is bad, like, I get you. And I like that you did that that in that way, because I agree with that kind of breakdown of it. But to me, it's we're not even discussing, by the way, guys, if the strike is warranted. We're not going to discuss the morality of the strike or whether or not we agree with or disagree with the strike right now. We'll get into that later maybe, but right now we're just focusing on, hey guys, this leaked. Was it bad? If it was bad, how bad was it? And then how bad is the media saying it was, and why are they saying that? So there's like 5-6 questions that are more important in a maneuver aspect of this. But it's kind of funny. This, in a weird way, this conversation is distracting from the real question, which is, why are we striking the Houthis? Again, so we'll get into later, because we're going to fall bait to the distraction, but we do want to put a reference, right? That's what's going on, right? So, but just as I interrupted you, you were eloquently kind of putting details. Hey.
And I just think it's very important that we keep, because what's going on right now is this is the first big scandal. I mean, and I say big, I don't really think it's that big, but it's the first sort of notable scandal of Trump's administration, at least 2.0, right? And what you're seeing is it's being, what'd you say? I'm sorry.
That's a 3.0, but we'll cut that out.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. But it's simultaneously being overblown and underblown, right? Like on the right side, on the conservative side, you get a lot of people saying, hey, there was no classified information leaked. That's arguable. I mean, they apparently marking something as classified. They mark stuff like what you're going to buy for lunch is top secret, right? So this probably would have been considered classified. Now, technically, it's up to the executive what's classified and what isn't. So he can just now say, hey, that's not classified and it isn't classified, right? And that's true. But it's like a technically true kind of thing. So on the right side, you have people sort of downplaying it, saying, hey, no harm, no foul. And to be fair, that's kind of what I'm doing. So I'll put myself in that category. Like I am kind of playing this down a little bit, but it's because on the other side of it, you have it being blown into like this huge thing, because obviously the Democrats want to pounce, right? That they see this as an opportunity. I think it's interesting that Hegseth is like the main guy getting all the heat right now, and it's not even his fault. The fault was Mike Waltz, right? He's the one who added the reporter. But people are calling for like Pete Hegseth to resign over this, right? And they're like calling him into question.
You say people. You say people when you really mean like bots and AstroTurf and
yeah. The narrative is calling for it, but yeah, so it's way overblown on that end of it, and I just think like you got to make sure we're cutting to the truth, right? That's the maneuver angle here. Like what really happened? What really happened?
Ask yourself that. Ask yourself what happened.
Yeah. In summary, the maneuver angle, at least mine, and I think you agree with me, but like not good, operational security failure. This kind of thing is kind of baffling to me. Like how could you possibly have added the wrong person to this? Like I just don't really understand how that could have happened.
Right, and that's why I can see where you're gonna maybe go with this, and I'm excited for that. But
yeah, well, I mean, the only place I would go with it is that I'm really questioning Mike Waltz right now, right? Like, what's your deal, bro? Like, what are you up to?
So that's part A. Okay, prefacing A, I want to ask you a question, but also like kind of give you a little bit of my opinion on something real quick here. If your name is Michael Waltz, what are you doing? That's part A, right? But to preface that, if your name is Jeffrey Goldberg, let me ask you a question. If your name is Jeffrey Goldberg, let's say you're Jeffrey Goldberg and you get these messages. Yeah. Is it sort of your American duty to kind of say, hey, let me kind of see if this is classified and like what really is this stuff, and let me coordinate with Pete and do all this and message him back and say, hey guys, I'm not supposed to be in this signal call. I have the messages. I'm going to make a story about how you leaked this stuff, but I might not include the details. Do you think he's going to cooperate on that level? And by the way, I'm not saying he has to. If journalism, if everything's free, I get that. That's free. I get that. But if you're a good faith actor, which he's not, obviously, that's the spoiler, right? Wouldn't you say something like, hey, not supposed to be in this group chat, like what's going on? And then maybe discuss whether or not the part where, that's questionably a leak shouldn't be leaked. So I'll kick that over to you.
It's a great question.
See if you're morally obliged to that and try to steelman the other side.
And that's honestly something. I'm glad you asked that, because I have been wrestling with that. Like, what should he have done, right? Like, let's take away for a second, the fact that Goldberg himself is a scumbag, right? Like, the guy has a history that's really checkered when it comes to integrity, right? Let's take that away for a sec. Like, agree. What if it's me in this situation? And I get this. If I'm a journalist, I do think there's a responsibility to explain, to just publish what happened, right? Now, the details of the messages, that's where I think it gets weird, right? Because as we're talking about, the entire text message chain is now public, right? Yeah. Maybe we could link to that or put him up with something. So the whole thing that he has access to is now public, and you can read through it and see what we're talking about. It's a nothing burger. There's really nothing bad going on there. But when he published it, he intentionally withheld, like, for example, he withheld the first thing that we put up there, right? Which is the actual timeline of what's going on. Yeah. And the way he put it in the story, I read it when it first got posted. So the way he phrased it in the story is like, they were putting attack plans and war plans, and I'm choosing not to publish that out of respect for national security, right? So even that framing, let's say he never ended up following up and posting the rest of it. Even that framing makes it sound worse than it is, right? So even right off the bat, it's like this guy saw an opportunity and pounced on it, but and chose to make it sound worse than it was, right? On purpose.
And that's journalism 101. You want to get clicks, so you got to make stuff sound worse. And honestly, the fact that because I didn't know that was the first post, I do see there. That's exactly what I'm asking, right? Like that is this is the only part of what was posted that could be at liberty to be withheld, right? In my mind, right? Like if you're everything else, you could just, I think you could just straight up post it on Twitter and say, hey, whatever, who cares? Because it's not, you can make your judgment. A reasonable person would say, hey, nothing really crazy here happened. It's just people praying for a good, and congratulating. But yeah, that part that he withheld, I'll say that he probably, and let's say ultra good faith. Maybe he was trying to withhold it because he thought that maybe it was sensitive. And then, when he got the backlash from people like, saying, oh, there's nothing in there, prove it. And then he posted it maybe. Or maybe he got, I
think that's what happened.
Maybe he even got greenlit by like somebody in the White House saying, you know what, who cares? Maybe not though, probably not.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's more like when people say the leak was Pete Hegseth or Michael Waltz's fault. In theory, like sure, at some level it was his fault. But as a gentleman named, Jeffrey Goldberg, who did leak this to the public. So, and again, I'm pro leaking. If you get information, leak it. I get that, but it's really you're the one that's got to take the fault, take the fall for any outcomes that become negative because of that, right? So, put things in perspective. Like look over at Edward Snowden, for example. Like whether or not you believe he's like KGB operative or whatever, he is taking. Well, I guess he's running away from the responsibility, but he's taking responsibility for what he leaked, right? But he leaked it, so I'm pro him leaking it, but own it, own the leak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Jeffrey's the leaker in my mind. It's not Pete. It's not Michael. It's none of these guys.
That is true. That's a good perspective. Yeah, because I mean, it was clearly well, I don't know that it was clearly a mistake.
So that's part A.
I still have
which we're gonna
weird. It's just I just don't understand how this could have happened. The reason I say it's clearly a mistake, and I'm sort of willing to go with that, is because Trump has, and this we could talk about that too. Trump's response has basically been, it's not a big deal, right? Like he doesn't seem, he's not fazed by it whatsoever. Basically, I can read you a little bit of this article that I actually can't remember where I found this, but they were talking about how Trump is seated around a table and the questions came up. By the way, just let me slob on the knob a little bit really quick, right? Like Trump, the transparency of this administration, and I'm not talking about the leak, right? I mean, in a way that is very
transparent.
It wasn't on purpose, right? But just the transparency of like Donald Trump, he's literally sitting around a round table, like just inviting any old question, right? Like this is a question that just comes out of the blue. Like, and again, this is supposed to be like the biggest scandal so far. Like, how do you think Obama or Biden or Harris would have dealt with like a scandal type question? Would they just be sitting in a room like, yeah, you there, what's up? What do you want to talk about? And then he just brings it up and you're just like, well, here's how I feel, this and that and this. Do you think this, that, and the other, if you will? Do you think that like, I'm just saying, like, I'm just sort of like trying to hype up Trump because I love that. I love that about this guy that you could just kind of ask him questions, just sitting there talking about crap, right?
Well, I mean, he does a lot of. Well, to your credit, and to your point, he does a lot of press conferences for a president, right? So in my mind, like he's doing a lot. Like people say he's a authoritarian kind of fascist anti-media guy, and he makes comments that are funny about like fake news and stuff, but he literally like has more press conferences than any president. Like he just does them like 3 times a day, like whatever, twice a day, whatever. And so he's just you can just ask him, what's going on with Andrew Tate? And he's like, I don't know what's going on with Andrew Tate. Like you asked Joe Biden that, and Joe Biden's like, my cousin's name was Andrew, I think, and my other cousin's name was like Tater. We beat Medicare, so it's kind of
he served in Vietnam with Andrew Tate. For
sure. So look at the difference. When someone tells you that Trump is a Nazi or Trump is a we're gonna edit that out. When Trump is an N slur, but the other way, and Trump is a fascist and this, that, and the other. Are you thinking that just think about how many times you've heard from Trump? But like, there's so many people asking Trump questions. Like he kind of is way pro free speech in my mind. But yeah, he
100%. Yeah,
he threatens libel.
The transparency,
and stuff,
the accessibility. The accessibility of the administration is great. I think it's a massive upgrade. And so his response was very gentle, and he's sitting there next to Waltz, right? So he didn't choose to like grandstand or like shift responsibility or make it be like, hey, I had nothing to do with this. It's all this guy. All he basically said was, this is the price you pay when you're not sitting in a situation room with no phones on, which is the best, frankly. He said, last week I was in a situation room with something very important. We had a couple people hooked up on our line, and I said, cancel the line. Sorry, fellas. What you do is we'll tell you about the meeting because I know people get on these lines, whether it's Signal or anything else. So it's gentle, right? Like he's saying this was not the way to do this, and it's don't do that again. But he's not saying like you're a scumbag, you caused all this damage and you made me look bad. He's not doing anything like that, right? Like he likes his guy, he likes Waltz. So hey, if Trump still trusts him, then I think, maybe there's not much to read into it. It could legitimately just be like a boomer moment, right? Like, but it's weird to me. To me, I can't understand it. But then again, I'm not, 50 years old who struggles with cell phones. So
Well,
I can't imagine I would ever make mistakes
that's
that.
my angle. My angle is like you put JD
Yeah.
Vance in the group chat, right? And then you're trying to put JD,
Yeah.
and then you put J, and then all of a sudden you put Jeffrey Goldberg on accident. Like maybe he's, but why is Jeffrey Goldberg in your phone?
JG.
Why is
Yeah.
he in your? Why is he one of your contacts?
See, that's the question. Exactly.
But
yeah, right
but
there.
obviously it's because he's probably and this could be like one of those House of Cards drama moments. He's the leak, so whatever. He's the guy inside or whatever, and not in the homoerotic
He's the
way,
imposter.
Yeah, exactly.
To make for our Gen Z audience, he's the. Yeah.
But my point on all this is that you shouldn't be on Signal if you're talking about this crap. And I get that. Like a lot of this stuff is mundaneries, but like, dude, why are we discussing any of this stuff on Signal, dude? Just talk about it in a skiff, or go talk about it in person. Anything that you want that you don't ever want anybody to hear, just don't open any technology at all. It's like that's kind of the downside of when because Dean and I are friends, but we don't live in the same city, so I can't really ever talk to him truthfully about anything that I would never want anybody to hear because I have to talk to him on the phone, Discord, whatever. We have no skiff right now, so whenever we do meet up, once a year, what have you, we have like a lot to kind of get through, right? And you got to keep that in memory because you can't store that on a piece of paper. You can't put it on a notepad drive. Right. If you have something you don't want anybody to know, just don't say it. Literally, don't say it until you're in a secure environment. Go outside. Do your due diligence, and I think there's a lot of importance to actually having stuff that nobody knows about, right? Because otherwise, your whole life is on the internet. And we can get into like a little side meta conversation about this. What do you think about the fact that there are currently, like for example, Mozilla Firefox is saying, "Hey, we're anti-ICE now because ICE is using our data collection to kind of round up, illegals and this, that, and the other."
Yeah.
And so they're conveniently anti-data collection when it's politically favorable. But then at the same time, they are data collecting for everything, for monetization, for this, that, and the other. So I guess kicking it over to you. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a great point, dude. I mean, I would call that the deep state.
Yeah.
Right. Like the deep state is this thing that it just extends in its little slimy tendrils into every aspect of our civilization, and it exercises control even without. It's not like there's an electoral process. It's not like there's a committee of people deciding to do this. It's not. All it takes is one individual, literally one individual in power at one of these corporations. And let's be frank, they're always going to be liberal leaning, right? I mean, 9 times out of 10, if you've gotten to that position within a company, it's because I'd say there's a number of factors. Number one, it's because you probably went to like a liberal college and got a degree in business or finance or whatever. So you've already been sort of indoctrinated on that end. And then number two is if you've climbed to that level of the company, you're a master at being inoffensive. All right. And like people like you and me, or maybe our viewers, we can practice being inoffensive, right? And you should do that. We watched the Shadow Realm video, but the thing is, the best way to be inoffensive is to just have that as part of your identity, right? Like, so it's not even like you're trying to be inoffensive. It's just that every time you hear something, your brain automatically goes to, what's the least controversial opinion I can have on this so that everybody still likes me, right? And that there's people who honestly think that way. So those are the people who get to these positions of power, and they're the ones making those decisions to no longer cooperate with ICE when it comes to data collection, right? Like, forget about the fact that we live in a democracy, supposedly, and that the majority of the population elected Donald Trump to carry out deportations. Forget about that. That the will of the people has already spoken.
Right.
This person has a political ideology, and they're going to enforce it no matter what, right? And that's what we live under.
And I like that you brought that up as a deep state, because they are part of the deep state. In my mind, like literally, like you think about all the 3-letter agencies, FBI, CIA, Alphabet, all the alphabet bros, right? That's part of it. But another part of it that we don't talk about is the capitalism side of things. The Google, Facebook, Amazon, all these Netflix, like all these companies, the FANG companies. It's like, I would say Apple is probably and maybe Meta nowadays, but probably not so much. But I would say Apple is of those companies, and I'm gonna take a hard stance on this. I know it's gonna sound controversial, but here it is. Apple is, in my mind, the only company of those 5-10 super companies that actually is more of a centrist kind of company. I think that a lot of the top guys at Apple are really kind of right wingers, if not centrists, whereas every other company is like 90% all left leaning. And so I'm not going to back that up with any evidence right now, but we'll do a deeper dive on that maybe next week or the week after. But just take my word on that, because I probably know more about it than you do. Not you personally, but the viewer. And so, okay, so Mozilla Firefox, in my mind, they're a private company, so I actually do think that it's within their jurisdiction and their right to say, hey, this is our political stance. We're taking that as a hard stance. I'm totally fine with that. What I'm not okay with, and what I want to criticize, is that they're inconsistent and they say, hey, the Patriot Act is fine because, hey, we're pro that, but as soon as it becomes ICE, now we're getting blowback from some of our shareholders. Maybe they think they are, but again, I think they're wrong about that. And I think everyone is always wrong about that. And as we know, go broke, go woke. But so kind of over to you again. Do you think that is it the concept of the fact that they're a private company and that they're more of a monopoly, or do you think it's more just that you disagree with their decision on how they exercise their business?
I think maybe it's both. I think it has to be both, right? Like the fact that they're a monopoly is directly because of their ability to fit in with what they're supposed to be doing, right? Like if they were going against, like, just let's take example of Tesla right now, right? Mm-hmm. Elon Musk is not doing what he's supposed to be doing in terms of staying safe instead of it not being controversial. He's doing the exact opposite of that. Yeah. He's the most controversial person in the country right now, maybe except for Donald Trump. And Tesla's suffering for it, right? I mean, I don't know the current stock price, but I know they were struggling for a while there, and they're being attacked by the left. I mean, physically, their stores are being attacked. So I mean, it's not a good time for Tesla right now, and Elon's taking a lot of heat. And if this continues, right, if this doesn't turn around, and I don't know if it'll last forever or not, but if the stock price keeps tumbling, if the and it may even be something where, like, the shareholders still like Elon, but they're being targeted so much by like leftist radicals and like violent protesters that they just kind of have no choice but to get rid of Elon just to keep their stores upright, so stuff like that can happen to you if you stray too far outside of what you're supposed to be doing. So yeah, I think it's a mixture of those things. Like, it's the company has to fit in order to maximize its profits, and that also gives them extra power too at the same time, right? Yeah. So,
and you criticized it well when you said you used the verbiage fake transformation, right? Like, you got to be skeptic of Zuck when he's saying, hey, I'm now wearing a gold chain, I'm doing jujitsu, I'm telling you about free speech, I do have like a big American flag in my background and in my backyard and stuff, and I do, whatever. So actions speak louder than words. He did hire Dana White to kind of cover his ass on that, and I get that. That is moving towards that kind of center / right side of things, or free speech side of things. But at the end of the day, I mean, he was literally pushing like free speech, anti-free speech stuff for the last 8 years. And I know he's not a political activist guy, but there are those people who say, hey, let me sign a petition that goes nowhere, but just as a statement. And I get that, and they just want to get their clicks. Yeah. And then there are people who are actually running the kind of the politics scene, like Bill Gates. He does a lot for that. And obviously his company is probably number one in his mind. He's probably thinking, okay, how do I make the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, be as profitable as possible, or whatever, right? And then even though they're just divorced and stuff, but yeah, it's like, I think a lot. And again, this is so out of scope to what we're talking about here with the F-18s and stuff, but
we're weaving,
but I think a lot of it is related to, like, and can be talked about, which is this postmodern society which we live in. And it's like, it's kind of related to, marriage. It's gonna sound weird, but marriage is kind of just like one of these, it's an institution, right? And people say, hey, you can just divorce somebody if you feel like you want to, no problem. Okay, let's circle that back. Well, how is this related to Bill and Melinda Gates? It's like the number one guy as far as wealth is just divorced, right? Same thing with Amazon. Yeah. The number one guy at Amazon, he's just divorced. Elon Musk, richest guy in the world. Richest on the charts. 13 kids, different parents, right? So you talk about, like, are you going to get a good picture of, like, hey, what should be a role model for the nuclear family? Is it going to be Elon Musk, billionaire? Is it going to be Bill Gates, billionaire? No. Is it going to be, you see what I'm saying, Jeff Bezos? No. Is it Mark? Maybe it's Mark. So, I mean, maybe it's Tim Cook. So is it none of those people, and it shouldn't be your dad? Yes, it should be in theory, but, everyone's dad is not going to be perfect. So over to you in a out of scope situation. Like, what do you feel like the country is going, and can you find a way to weave that back to the F-18s? Let's see. Let's see. I'm going to do my best here. Well, you've got, I'll even say, like, to add to your point, like Donald Trump, even, right? Multiple times divorced, multiple baby mamas. And yeah, I mean, so good examples of the opposite of that would be like JD Vance, right? Would be, who else did you mention? Ironically, maybe Mark Zuckerberg, right? Just one wife. And well, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I can weave it back. No, we'll get it back.
I'm trying my best.
We'll get it back.
Yeah, we'll eventually get back to it. But I just think the tendrils are just ever present. And maybe one way we can weave it back is to just think of like the actions of Jeffrey Goldberg, right? As a perfect example, because as you said, the good faith play here would have been to reach out and say, I think I was accidentally added to this. I'm going to have questions for you about how that could have happened, and I'm also going to publish a story that this happened. But I did remove myself, and I'm not going to continue to make it worse for you.
Yeah.
But here's the situation, right? And as a journalist, I have a responsibility to talk about it. I think I'd be okay. I'd be fine with that. I don't even necessarily have an issue with him publishing what he published,
No.
but I have an issue with the way that he did it, because it's so obvious that he intended to drum up all this controversy, right? Like it's like you said, it's journalism 101. He's trying to generate clicks. He's trying to generate revenue for his company. It doesn't really matter what the truth is, how this is going to come across, who's going to be affected by it, whether or not that he's overblowing. None of that comes into play. Like he wants to make it as dramatic as possible. And now, even though you and I are sitting here talking about it, and like, people who listen to this are going to hopefully agree with us, like, yeah, it's not really a big deal. Good luck convincing half the country who vote for Democrats that this is not a big deal, right? They're going to be screeching about this for at least the next week, and maybe longer. I mean, who knows how long they'll drag this out as like a serious thing.
Right.
And maybe it gets to the point where Trump has to actually concede something major. Like maybe he has to get rid of Waltz, right? Which he clearly doesn't want to do. Maybe he has to get rid of Hegseth, right? In the worst possible scenario, even though Hegseth had nothing to do with this.
Hegseth
right?
is based.
But Hegseth,
he's really based.
Yeah, he's super based, but he was also super controversial. Like he passed through the Senate with like 1 vote, right? Like he was the hardest confirmation that they had.
Which is probably a good thing, right? That's a good thing.
Oh, it's a very good thing in my view, right?
The least votes you pass through with is probably the big, exact signals. Good pun. It signals that you're the best.
Yeah, there you go.
Best actor.
Yeah.
There. So and that's a good weave, and I like that weave. That was really well transitioned back into it. But yeah, like going back to this, gentlemen, and yeah, that's something I'll leave it at that because we've already checked the audience. So gentlemen, listen to this. If you're somebody who's looking at this and asking, okay, how would I good faith handle this? Look how far you are away from how Jeffrey Goldstein handled this. And I get that he's doing this because it's his job and it's his livelihood, and I totally respect that. And hey, get after it, and I get that. You have no obligation in my mind to say, hey, let me handle this the right way. You do have have that as a moral obligation in some aspect, but you're your own thing. So you're your own guy who's already rejected Christ, probably. I'm just assuming based on your last name, we might have to edit that part out. But listen.
No, definitely, yeah.
So yeah, you don't have a moral obligation to to do what I'm saying, but and I get that you're totally getting after it and it's part of your career, and I get that you're totally involved in get after it, man, make your money, and I get it. But on the flip side of things, I don't even blame Goldstein for this because Goldberg rather. I see I'm messing up the name.
Goldschmidt. Yeah.
I don't even blame Jeffrey.
No, you're right. Yeah.
I don't blame Jeffrey for this because we live in a society right now that is Skinner box generated to be rewarding this kind of stuff. So
yeah,
of course it's going to get clicks. Of course division is going to happen. You just mentioned a good point. If I have some family members who I can ask like, hey, what's going on this with this, that, and the other, and they're seeing things from a different view than I am because I'm a centrist who kind of leans to the right, and especially nowadays because of how far left has been kind of going farther and farther to the left. So you ever seen that meme where you're like, this is me 10 years ago, this is me today, this is the left, and this is the left today. So it's like I look like I'm a far right extremist, but I'm really where I was, and I'm if not more in the center. But I can't talk about this is your stress test. If Joe Biden did this and actually answer this in good faith, would you think critically and say, hey, really nothing happened here? And maybe not out loud, maybe you'd be like angry about it out loud, but like internally, would you kind of know, hey, it's just whatever, big mistake, but like whatever, dude, this is nothing actually sensitive.
Right. I agree. I would be.
No, I'm asking you
the
that.
second one there.
Okay, I got you.
Well, no, no, it would be. It's a nothing burger. Like again, not ideal. Let's find out how this happened. Let's make sure it never happens again. Yeah. But no harm, no foul. At the end of the day, right? It's just if anything, you're glad that it happened the way it did, right? Because they didn't talk about anything more sensitive, right? And now you kind of realize, hey, we really can't be doing this, right? Yeah. And so if they do need to talk about something more sensitive, they're going to have more strict processes in place, which is that's a good. It's kind of a blessing, right? Like you hope for major errors that only lead to little consequences like this one, right?
Yeah, this is actually the most nothing of anything, and the fact that you're saying that's the biggest scandal kind of makes me think like, okay, nothing's going on. Literally, nothing ever happens.
Yeah, he's undefeated, the Chud Jack. Yeah,
but
never loses.
Segueing into a small thing before we jump off of this, I don't know if you saw this, but there was Steve Bannon on an interview with Chris Cuomo said, yeah, we're working on plans for a 2028 run, right? That's a divisive thing to say. I don't
Yeah.
even know if he's even really talking to Trump, but he's kind of saying that that's what's happening. And then when pushed on it, because Chris Cuomo did his due diligence and said, hey, don't just say that. Don't be mysterious. Like, what's the plans? He said, we're working on plans to make it happen. So,
He has elements of a plan.
right. So
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably saw that, but I'm kind of curious, like, what do you think about that situation?
It's interesting, like you said. I don't even know how much sway or leeway or even access that Bannon still has. But he has been tooting that horn. I've been listening to Bannon interviews. He's kind of did a little media blitz maybe in the last month or so, and everywhere I've listened to him, he's been saying that he thinks it's possible. I think he's escalating a little bit because the first time he just sort of floated it as a possibility, but now you're saying they're trying to put plans together. So I think he's escalating. He's being more serious about it. I actually think Bannon is a pretty smart guy. Like he's a pretty savvy. What am I
Strategist.
trying to?
Yeah.
Yes, strategy. Exactly. Yes. So now, what do I think about it? I mean, I don't know. I'm not even that
you guys
opposed
see
to
that
it,
in real
right?
time? You guys see
Like,
that in real time? What just happened?
yeah,
Gentlemen,
I'm thinking
listen.
about it. Yeah, I didn't
Masculinity
just,
leads to the answer, I don't know. Do you hear that? He doesn't know because he
Yeah.
hasn't thought too much about it. And what he's going to do is he's going to introspect
really
later and say,
haven't.
what's going on with this? How do I feel about this? He's not going to
Yeah.
he's
I
not
mean,
going to,
hey, I'll introspect right now for you, right? Like
yeah.
I'll think about it. I'll think about it right now. Like,
But what he's not going to do, and I'm going to cut you off again because I love doing that. He's not
Yeah.
going to say something like just to everybody, just saying, "Oh, you know what? This is my opinion because I was told to think this from CNN, MSNBC." Like that's my whole point. Stop
Right.
injecting your thoughts from some super conglomerate. Just go. If you're going to inject thoughts,
Yeah.
do it from your mother. Like do it from your father. Like don't do it from some
yeah,
super conglomerate.
exactly. Different from the Bible, right?
Yeah, do it from the
Yeah,
Bible. Do it from something. The New Testament.
No, that's. I agree. No, I'm glad that we're doing this live. I mean, I'll say this, and maybe we could have a whole episode or something deep dive on this at some point. But I'm sort of out on democracy. That's maybe my most controversial opinion I've dropped so far, like on this podcast.
Okay.
I'm not super high on democracy as a system of government. And let's be honest, like if Donald Trump, my main concern with Donald Trump is that he's old AF, right?
Right.
And I'd really rather he make room for somebody else like JD Vance, which
Right.
we're about to talk about. So now, in principle, am I opposed to Donald Trump with a third term? No, I'm really not. Like I know I'm supposed to be because the Constitution, there's only 2 terms. There's norms we have to observe. George Washington. I get that. I get all that. Right. That makes sense to me. But democracy sucks, right? And these 4-year term limits that we have, I think, are crippling our country. Right. I mean,
Right.
how ridiculous is it that 4 years of Trump and we're sort of like neutral, leaning towards Russia on the Ukraine front, right? And then 4 years of Biden, who just completely hates Russia and anti-Russia and stokes a war, and now we're back to 4 years of like gentle, sort of semi-pro-Russia.
Right.
Like as a country, it's ridiculous for us. But think about other countries. How are they supposed to like? How is Putin supposed to come to the table with the United States and like respect our leverage and our position in the world, which we have? I mean, we're a very powerful country, powerful military. We should be able to get what we want. And Putin is willing to respect that, but he also has to be honest and be like, well, what you want might change again in 4 years, right? So how am I supposed to take you seriously? Like other countries see that. So I guess I'm just saying like, hey, if we ended up with like, I've said privately anyway that like I think we should do something like 10-year term limits. Like
Yeah.
maybe you get elected to one 10-year term,
Yeah.
and that's it. Maybe something like that. I'd be in favor of something like that.
I'm
but
fine with that if we make
Yeah.
the and again this is a side tangent, but I like what you pointed out though because you said okay, so you mentioned like how it affects the global status, right? Way more than we think because we don't think about that, right? But I mean, as Mike Benzo said himself, there is no such thing as domestic policy, right? Your domestic policy is another man's foreign policy. So just like you said, like
Right.
imagine the gentleman, let's say, let's use empathy here. Let's use the liberal side of things. Imagine the gentleman in China right now, the 14-year-old boy who's making the cell phone that you use for 10 cents an hour.
Yeah.
Now, that gentleman is now going to be affected by the tariffs, right? So you're thinking, oh, the tariffs, but then now you have a 14-year-old boy who's like, I care about this a lot. It actually affects me because my job depends on it. Because if the tariffs are doubled or tripled, we might stop doing business. So I might have to find a different factory to work at, right? Or maybe, God forbid, I might have to go back to to my hometown, which is very rural, and I have no ability to like jump from the low class to the middle class. You know what I'm saying? Like, so like
Right.
let's put yourself in that 14-year-old's shoes, and the reason why I'm doing this is because I actually believe from a philosophical perspective that jumping back to that rural lifestyle is actually good because it minimizes your liabilities in a big way. It minimizes your expectation for liabilities. So yeah, I get it. There's technology, there's this, that, and the other, but this is going to segue perfectly into culture shift here, and that's why I'm bringing this up, is that our expectation for what a good life is right now compared to what it was 20 years, 30 years ago, 50 years ago is what's ruining the nuclear family. It's what's ruining a lot of institutions, the marriage institution, education, etc.
Yeah.
Because now you've got people on both sides of the biological sex are saying, hey, I need to be making $200,000 a year as a male. And then a woman says, hey, I need to have a career before I need to be 36 with a career, and I need to be like established before I even have my first kid. And so you get to a point where now you're not even at a peak age to have kids, not just for fertility reasons, but for, hey, let's say you're 32, your career's all set, and you're ready to have your first kid. Well, you got to take a year off to have the kid, maybe in good faith, right? And so then when you go back, are you going to go back immediately, or are you going to offset the cost of the motherhood to somebody else who's here from Guatemala, et cetera, as you mentioned, like maybe Pablito's sister, and then now you've got them instilling values on your
His
kid.
mom.
Where you see what I'm saying? So now my point is, it's such a way backward situation, and now. Not only that, but you're 32, and then when he's 18, you'll be 50. So you won't even be able to kind of be, that's where I'm going to be, right? Like when my son's 18, I'm going to be 50. So it's like, hey man, that's crazy to think about. That's crazy to think about because, back in the day, if I had him when I was 20, I'd be 40 or something. I'd be young enough to still kind of run around with him. But 50 is,
right.
I mean, I'm going to do my due diligence and do the Pete Hegseth, stronger equals harder to kill. Shout out Ripito. But segueing into that, I think it's a good way to talk about the culture shift, but that's take it away from
great
there,
weave. Gotta do that. That's a fantastic weave. Yeah. So the next story, the next major thing we're going to talk about is the cultural shift among Gen Z men, and I guess really all the Generation Z in general. Gen Alpha is a little too young to talk about. I don't really think they have opinions yet. So Gen Z has shifted rightwards, and particularly with men. So there's a few data points that I'm going to read, and then we can sort of get into the meat of it. But if you look at 2024 election polls, this is according to Edison Research, Trump won men aged 18 to 29 with 53% of the vote. This was a group that Biden took by 11 points in 2020. So that is a massive shift. And among Gen Z men specifically, so I guess that's probably a little bit younger than that, 60% went for Trump. Okay, so that's a pretty major shift. This is a demographic that traditionally has always gone liberal. Self-identified conservative Gen Z men has jumped from up to 36%, which was 29% in 2020. So just in 4 years, that's a pretty major increase. And more importantly, I think the identification as a liberal went from 34 down to 28%. So net swing, that's 13 points, Rightward. And let's see, I think that's maybe the most important stats I want to talk about, but it just gives you the framework here that we're talking about. So I think the numbers tell the story, but I think, and particularly our audience, I know our demographics are like 19 to 34-year-old men. So I know that everybody listening to this knows exactly what we're talking about. Like, just talk to any of your friends, go to the public spaces in school, at work. I really know very few men today that still identify as liberal. Whereas 10 years ago, I think every single one of my friends would have said they were liberal in some way, right? At least sort of leaned towards liberal. But today, man, every single one of them would say they're conservative, right? And very few are still willing to even call themselves liberal. Some may say like centrists, right? Even to just avoid identifying with that. So, I mean, I think the question I want to start off to you, right, is why exactly is this happening? Like, I mean, you sort of alluded to it a little bit when you were talking about like the nuclear family and marriage and how this is all being destroyed. But what's your breakdown? What's your analysis of why exactly this is happening?
And I'm going to do something that's not very in my character. I'm going to go top down with this.
Nice.
So women, okay, women right now are in a position where they've never been before. They're in a position of power, okay? Women have equal power to men, if not more in some cases. We'll get into that later. But so they are able to, because of this new power that they have, and by the way, when I say new, I'm talking about the last 65 years, right? They've been slowly forced into a situation of they have to have a career. And this is because post-World War II, right? So post-World War II, they have to have a career. And that's due to redacted. You can do your own research on that and why. But so now that's an expectation that a woman has a career, okay? Whether that's good or bad, don't worry. I'm not making a claim on that. I'm saying that's a fact. So now that women have to have careers, that means that they have money. Okay, so if they have money and stability, what do they need you for? Like, that's what I'm asking, right? So they view this whole, okay, now I've got power in the situation where I can now vet men to be, not only they have a career, but they have to have a bunch of other traits, which we've discussed episode 3 and 4. The bar is going up as far as hypergamy goes. Where am I going with this? It's a good question. So now that women have this situation where they have higher standards for men, they're saying, hey, you know what? I don't actually need to. I want you to have a $200,000 income, 6'2", make me laugh, etc. Totally fine, have your standards. I get that. But the question that men are having now, the 18, 19-year-old broccoli heads of the world, they're saying, hey, what do I get in return for getting to this point where I've got a $200K salary? I've worked my ass off for 15 years to figure this shit out. I've signed all my prenuptial agreements. I've gotten all my stuff locked away in in trust so that you can't take it from me when we get divorced, not if but when. So that's what's going on, is the men are adapting to, the boys are adapting to, if you will, what the current state of the hypergamy is. So that's my view on what really is causing the shift, because I know that's not political, but that's socio-political, and that leads into women in general. And I talked about this last week. They're more inclined to be falling for the propaganda that is empathy, right? And that's why a lot of women are pro-immigration. Immigration is objectively a bad thing at certain numbers, right? It's good for some things, but objectively, if you look at the metrics, it's bad for a lot of numbers. However, if you have an immigrant in front of your face, knock on your door, and you say and they say, oh, I'm injured, I'm sick, whatever, it's going to be hard for you to say, well, technically the numbers are going to specify that you shouldn't come into I don't think you should be here. I can't. But you're going to help them, right? It's in your human nature to say, come on in, let's get you a meal, let's get you warmed up. Like, you want to take them in, right? Problem is, you can't take 6 million of them in, right? You can't do that feasibly.
Right.
But that propaganda works more on women than it works on men, because they're more prone to that stuff, and that's whatever. And that's my opinion, and also that's backed up with research, but you can do your own, and you can disagree with me, put it in the comments if you disagree. And again, I'm going top down, but it's now become bottom up, so let me finish that out with this. It's not about politics. It's about sociopolitics, and that's why I think the men are saying, well, I'm MGTOWing. I mean, at this point, why would I even capitulate to that? Therefore, they don't have to have these fake beliefs. Whereas, from 1990s to the 2010s, you had to have this fake of, oh, let me match the belief of the woman so I can kind of sleep with her and get with her, etc. And then you become the caricature of what you faked since day one, and now you're a quote unquote liberal, right? That's how men have become liberals. Right. That's my view. That's kind of where I'm going with it. So that's my explanation. That is the absolute state of what's going on in my mind. So taking it over to you.
Great. Yeah. Perfect top down. I mean, I don't even feel necessary on this podcast anymore. You nailed the top down.
You go bottom up if you want to, but
no, I cannot. I don't even know how to do that. It's a foreign language to me. But what I'm going to do is go top down from a different angle. So I completely agree with everything you just said, but I'm going to add something else to it, basically, which is the cultural shift. Because of everything you just said, young men are much more likely to have these rational reactions to it. As you said, women are more going to lean on their empathy and their emotions and what feels good and what they think they should be thinking and doing, whereas men are just going to deal with the world as it is. And so that's like what you're seeing is a return of the masculine spirit as the driver of what's not only cool, like good, but cool, right? So it is cool to be a man. Like, if you think of like what is cool, like it's somebody who, like, I think of somebody, when I think of cool, like somebody comes to my mind, right, is like Tyler Durden, right? He's a caricature of cool, right? That's the whole point of that movie, is that it's like this dude's subconscious desire to be extremely good looking and extremely capable and extremely motivated and driven. Like, Tyler Durden is the masculine ideal, but as a microcosm of the late 1990s when he was created, right? So I think we're getting back to the point where we recognize that that's what cool is. During the mid 2000s to like maybe let's say about, I don't know, 3 to 4 years ago, cool was like, and I'm not being racist, I'm just explaining, cool was like black culture, right? Like hip hop, and aside from black culture, you also had like the feminist movement and like sexual degeneracy and like getting laid and getting on Tinder and going to the clubs and going to bars, right? And like this is always something that young people have enjoyed, like going out and partying. But it went from something that's like, hey, this is sort of a youthful thing that we enjoy, to like, if you're not doing this, you're no longer part of the culture. You're no longer cool or interesting or any part of anybody wants to be around. And that's sort of being replaced by the more traditional masculine thing of like, hey, have your fun as a teenager. But by the time you get to a certain age, you're expected to grow out of these things. You're expected to engage with the world in a more serious way, see problems for what they are, and then try to solve them. So young men are seeing that. And I think the reason they're sort of forced into this sooner is because the problems are so much more severe than the ones, let's say, Tony and I had to deal with. I mean, we're still dealing with them too. We live in the same world. But like, let's say like when you and I were like 12 or 13, there was still there was at least an attempt to lie to us about what the future and our prospects were, right? There was still an attempt to like tell us, hey, just go to college, get your degree, you'll go get a good job, you'll get married, by the time you're 24, you'll have some kids and you'll afford a house, and you'll live in a safe neighborhood. There was an attempt to lie to us. Even back then, I don't think it was true, but they at least tried. Whereas the Gen Z people, you can't even lie to them because it's so obviously not true, right? Like, if you're coming out of college right now, the prospects are so bleak, right? I mean, on the job front, on the economic front, it's just so trash. And so we live in this world of the liberal ideology has done its damage, and it's no longer possible to deny it. And it's very obvious now that if you still adhere to this liberal ideology, that you're just somebody who's not plugged in. You're just somebody who's not really thinking at a high level. You're somebody that just sort of swallows the propaganda, and that's lame now, right? That's very lame, and maybe I think it's always been lame, but it just so happens that this is like the side of the aisle that it affects now. So, long story short, there, it's now much cooler and much more plugged in to just be a conservative, because we're the ones now who are the counter revolution, like the countercultural movement, right? We're the ones who are like, hey, we're still a minority. I mean, those stats I just read you, like the conservative movement is still a minority, but we're growing specifically because we have that cultural edge. And it may sound kind of dumb that I'm saying, oh, we're cool now, so that's why we're winning. I'm sorry, but that's the way things are. Like, politics matters. Like, your image is what matters. If you like, think of Obama. Obama was cool, right? That's why he was so popular. That's why he won. That's why the youth loved him. That's the situation we're in now. It's just switch sides, and yeah, I think that's the main thing. So I mean, more I could say about that, and I will, but I'll let you take over since I spoke for a little bit there. But yeah, what do you think about that? I mean, I think both of our points sort of fit together, but I'm taking it from a much even more top down. I had to go higher than you because you stole my top down there a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a perfect time to
edit
pause
this
here.
Part out.
I'm gonna try to get my camera to get all fixed here.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's doing that, but
oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. No, and I think that's a great top-down explanation. I did steal yours, but to be honest with you, like, there's only really one way to explain this, and that is from the top. Thinking about explaining this from the bottom, it's just too hard of a concept to explain from the bottom, right? You got to go into this. You got to go into, in 1962, whatever, the No Fault Divorce Act was put into play, and then you go down this, that, and the other. I could do it. I could do all that, but that's not the best way to message this, right? And that's one thing I've learned from you is that if you message something in a good way, that's going to be heard better, right? And just because you're factual and you do details and do due diligence does not mean that the person on the other side of things is going to hear that out. And this is related to the culture shift in a lot of ways because, you mentioned Obama. Obama's messaging was perfect for the time, right? He was catering to people who kind of where they were fed up with Bush, they were fed up with the fake lies and stuff, and he got a lot of people to kind of get active with politics. But he also took advantage of a lot of technology at the time. And that was, hey, how do we get people online to kind of talk about politics too? So that's a big thing he did. But no, I mean nowadays it's more like, ask yourself this: if you're in the audience in your 30s or late 20s, what would an 18-year-old or 21-year-old man or whatever, what does he have to gain from pretending to be, pretending to care about abortion or pretending to care about immigration in an empathetic way,
right,
or pretending to care about same-sex marriage, or pretending to care about Ukraine, or pretending to care about Israel, right? Like, why would he benefit from that at all? If he's already checking out of society, and we have numbers to back this up, Gen Z is it's the least sexually active group of any generation, but they're the most outwardly discussing the sexual degeneration of any. So it's like they're the most sexually dysfunctional group of people, right? So they're already checking out of that world. So it's almost a nihilistic viewpoint, but what do you really gain when you're just, instead of consuming that kind of content, you're more of a Sigma male grind set, chain view, TikTok slop kind of, really you're something's wrong with them with the way they're being forced a lot of information. So I don't know. To me, it's like I've seen a lot of Gen Z kids who are just outwardly saying they're pro-Trump. And, 8 years ago, there was like literally one moment in time I remember specifically, which was, I'm at university and I have might have been 9 years ago at this point. Trump was like, everyone said, hey, Trump is awesome. This is great. Even Oprah was like, yo, I love Trump and everything. This is great. You're running. That's awesome. And then, he went on the View, and they were all really nice to him and stuff. And then, a couple months later, he made a comment about Rosie O'Donnell in a funny way, in my mind. Really a good way to handle a shit test. Yeah. And, hey, I'm talking to people at school saying, that's interesting. Trump's running. That's interesting, And then that night, I feel like everyone just was plugged in and turned on. And, they have chips in their brain already. And this is my schizo thought going, but it's like somebody programmed everybody except me or whatever to say, hey, we are now against Trump. I go to school that next day. Literally, I go to class and I'm like, yeah, did you hear that thing that he said last night about Rosie O'Donnell? That was hilarious. Everyone looks at me like, that was offensive. That was incredibly offensive to women. Rosie O'Donnell is now getting death threats on Twitter. This is that and the other. I am now a product of, I am an unpaid operative for the DNC. So it's kind of like that was what was happening. And I saw that in real time. I'm like, well, I don't love Trump, but I thought he was funny. I'm not going to capitulate to your...
He's undeniably funny.
Yeah.
For sure.
But there was that level of social pressure that was like pushing me to be, hey, I can't talk about Trump now at all because my friends, which really were just, some were friends, but most were just classmates that I had to cooperate with for like projects and stuff. I couldn't talk about Trump at all because they would just view me negatively and that could affect work. So that's when you start, I bet you could point out to a moment in your life when that maybe happened too. But, that's my point is now there's not that social pressure. It's almost, that's the opposite way. It's almost like you have to really justify your belief that Biden is has dementia. You see what I'm saying? Like we've gaslit people so much that we're at that point where you're like, hang on a minute. You're telling me that you can't, you don't have to consent. You don't have to inform me that you're going to give my daughter puberty blockers?
Right.
Hang on a minute. That's my kids, though. Hang on a minute. You see what I'm saying? So now you're like, wait a minute. I'm not the crazy one. You're the crazy one, as Andrew Schulz would say. So it's like, and that's why I got the mustache. But yeah, that's answering your question a little bit with overkill. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
No, I'm glad you did that. It made me want to zoom out even more. Like, I think what happens is you have, and I think maybe we're going to experience this cycle forever, right? You have a party or an ideology that takes power, right? It's this back and forth throughout history where so we had the Bush, for example, the neoconservative movement took power after Clinton. And really, arguably, Clinton kind of was a neoconservative. But after that, you sort of had the super neocon, which was the Bush administration, right? This was peak neocon. And we'll never see anything like it again because the neocon movement is dead. But what you had from the neocon movement was the most cynical, ugly, warmongering, bloodthirsty, hyper-capitalist ideology that the country has ever seen, right? And arguably did more damage to the country, second only maybe to like Obama, right? And the reason that they were able to do that is because they were able to build and build and build. So you started going all the way back to like Bush 1, and then, as I said, Clinton, who were arguably neoconservatives, but they also did things that made sense for the country. Like, for example, everybody knows that Clinton was the final president who actually had a surplus in the budget, right? So not only did we have a balanced budget under a Democrat, which is unfathomable at this point in our political system, but that's what happened. So these presidents actually did things that made sense for the country, and they sort of built up sentiment, which is like, hey, we sort of like this ideology, we like where we're going. And then every presidential candidate who comes after that has to sort of be a twist on that a little bit. Like the Bush is the same thing, but just sort of slightly further to the right, and Gore would have been the same thing, but further to the left, right? He cared so much about climate change, for example. But Bush is the one who won, and we got, like I said, they basically took what they had, their build, their sentiment, and then ran it off the cliff, right? They went totally insane and caused everybody to hate them, right? And that's what gave rise to Obama, right? And now Obama was this very accelerated. And I think what we're going to see now with the way technology is, the way the news flows, the way these conversations happen, is these cycles will just be kind of much more abbreviated, because Obama was like the whole cycle in and of himself. Like he took advantage of the backlash against Bush and then swung everything so far in the other direction that now the liberals can't win elections, right? I mean, arguably they won in 2020, but we could talk about that some other time. But now you have this hatred for liberals, and really right now the liberals are nowhere, man. Like they have nothing. As we said, that the biggest controversy so far at Trump's for a second term has been the signal thing, and which is a nothing burger, but they're going to run with it, believe me, because they have nothing else. There's nothing else going for them. Nobody likes any of their policies. Nobody likes any of their politicians. I mean, can you name a single like super popular Democrat politician? He doesn't exist. There's nobody. Not even on the level of like Vance, right? Who Vance is maybe a little controversial. I'm trying to think of who's a Republican that's like semi-popular. Maybe Democrat? Like.
Oh, Republican. Okay.
No, I'm thinking just to compare to like who would you even? Because I'd say like the most popular Democrat.
Ted Cruz or like.
That might be a good example.
Secretary. What's the guy's name? That's now Marco Rubio. One of those guys.
Rubio, yes. So those are good examples. Like, so compare them, who are like still pretty well liked and obviously getting things done and much closer to like the average American, to like the most popular Democrat who's going to be like AOC, right? What a joke. Or like Bernie Sanders.
And we'll get into the AstroTruth on that, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, so this is who the Democrats have to lean on. I mean, what's his name? Tim Walz. Yeah, because I'm thinking Mike Waltz. We were just talking about that. Tim Waltz was the vice presidential candidate. Kamala Harris disappeared. She went to a black hole somewhere. Tim Waltz is like still out there trying to like throw shade at Elon and stuff, but he's such a clown and nobody cares about him.
No, and that's why
Democrats have nothing.
You have Gavin Newsom, and you have, this is the real guy who I think is, what's that guy that owns the Dallas Mavericks? Whatever, he's so irrelevant, I don't know his name, but yeah.
Cuban.
You got Mark Cuban or whatever his name is. And so I think, and I think you're right about this, and I actually do think Newsom is going to be, like, he's actually smart in a psychotic way. I'm not giving him credit, but I am giving credit. So this is what you're talking about. The shift is going to be where he's going to say, hey, because there already is, in my mind, I'm already seeing a cringe aspect of the right wing already. Just 2 weeks in or 2 months in, I'm already seeing like the boomers are still talking about like Israel like it's relevant. I don't care about Israel. I'm still seeing the Trump budget cuts, but then we just send more to Israel. So you see where I'm going with that? It's like, it's like Newsom might take advantage of that and say, hey, let me push out this LBG trannyism stuff and get that out of my spectrum here, and let me pretend I agree with Charlie Kirk on a lot of these issues and gaslight the people and say I wasn't for all this, even though I signed everything into law, whatever. But let me move forward and say, yeah, no, you're right, man. That's a little crazy. But all I'm saying is this, that, and the other. He starts to sound like a reasonable person because he can kind of make that whole thing do that. He can make himself sound reasonable, right? So I think the culture might shift back to saying, hey, I think it will be shifting back to, and that's why I think he's going to be a front runner in 2028. He'll be like kind of a really, I think it'll be a hard, him versus Vance. It'll be interesting. I think I'm calling it right now. Him and Vance is going to be a good trade off, I think. And so I'm excited for that, for those debates. I'm excited for that because those two people are good at debating. They're both good at talking, both pretty young compared to the boomers of the world. And I think that'll be fun to watch. That'll be interesting to watch. You can mark that down. That's not a crazy prediction, but like that's going to be fun to watch, I think.
No, I think you're right. Well, I think the interesting thing is specifically like Newsom started his podcast, right? And I think like Michelle Obama tried to start a podcast too. I don't even know if they're still doing it, but the liberals are trying to like join this independent media, because one thing that this election taught the liberals is that the old way of doing things is definitely dead, right? And that's the only reason Trump won, is because the mainstream media is dead. The lamestream media. Trump killed it, right? If there's one thing we can all collectively, and Democrats would never admit this, but we can all collectively like thank Donald Trump for, and like his service to the country was slaughtering the corporate media, the mainstream media. They're dead. They're completely irrelevant. Nobody cares about what they have to say. Everybody knows they're just mouthpieces for the establishment. And I don't just mean like whoever's in power. I mean like the deep state establishment that's still controlling huge swaths of the country. And nobody trusts them. Nobody gives a crap. Everybody listens to the independent media. They listen to podcasts like you and I, right? Huge voices, very influential. And then you have like minor guys like Joe Rogan, people who are PBD, people who try to catch up to us. But anyway, they're making their points. This is who people go to for news these days. And so the Democrats have seen that, and they're gonna try to join. But here's what I think. I mean, I would tend to agree with you right now. Like if there's any Democrat that's going to be a front runner in 2028, it's going to be Newsom. There's this other guy, and I don't even know. I'm just going to bring him up because I know he gets talked about. There's like the governor of Pennsylvania. He's some guy. I don't even know his name, but that's another person you have to think about. But Newsom, I think, is the main one. And they're trying to join this podcast train right now. My issue with that, from a strategic standpoint, if I'm going to steel man the liberals, the liberal ideology does not play well in a podcast, right? A podcast means you have to explain what you believe and why you believe it, and you have to make good points. You have to like be willing, like you and I are just riffing, right? We're just talking.
Right.
We're getting to the bottom of what we believe, and it's like there's no talking points. There's no pre-record. There's no pre-thought out. Like this is why we're going to be on message. Nothing like that. We're just talking. That's how the most popular podcasts in the world, like ours and Joe Rogan's, that's how they function.
No, yeah.
Democrats can't operate in this environment. They cannot, because the liberal ideology is not coherent.
No, because like as Elon said, you really get to know them in hour 3 or 4, right? You hour 1 and 2, they can kind of maybe get that through that with Adderall and maybe some talking points.
Right.
Like maybe they got the earpiece or whatever. But I mean, it's like when you talk about guys like Joe and smaller guys like Lex, and And hang on a second, I gotta take this. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Hello? Hey, what's going on, Joe? Yeah, I don't know if we can. Again, we got to make time for it, but I'm not sure on our end if
this guy again.
If we've got, I don't know, Joe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the middle of a podcast right now, so let me finish this podcast and then we'll talk about it. But I don't know if we have time. I'm not sure, but it'd be nice. Yeah. Okay. All right. Peace, buddy. But yeah, like I said, Joe Rogan constantly calling me to get on his podcast. Yeah. But again, like I said, it's not about that. It's about the fact that Kamala Harris had an opportunity to get on his podcast, and she smeared the whole. She dropped the ball on that one, but I think that wouldn't have helped. I think it would have more exposed kind of her in a bad way. But I don't think it would have hurt.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't even think 20% of the people.
I think it could have hurt.
Okay, yeah, you're right, maybe. But
yeah, I think it could have hurt because, well, like you said, it would have exposed her, which she has nothing to her, so she would have floundered under any pushback whatsoever. But also, even just her base would have. They think Joe Rogan is an N-word in terms of the fascists, right?
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, the guys from Germany in the 1930s.
Right.
That they think that's what Joe Rogan is. So even just going on that podcast would have been.
I remember Bernie went on there, and he was being like smeared by New York Times or whatever. Oh, he went on like woke, or not woke, racist podcast. It's like, dude.
Well, one point, interesting thing. I just want you guys to think about this. Isn't it interesting that the long form discussions we're talking about, just off the cuff, not scripted, no talking points, those types of conversations, plus platforms that are actually like mostly uncensored. Think about X, think about 4chan, right? These types of uncensored platforms and uncensored conversations are always smeared as right-wing, right, fascists. Isn't that interesting? Unless there's a governing body controlling who gets to say what, unless there's a tight 2-minute segment where you can just say your talking point and then they go to commercial, unless that's what's going on, then it's always considered right-wing fascist dialogue. Every single time. You can't think of an example of a left-wing, like I said, name a popular left-wing podcast. I mean, they exist, but amongst only that little insulated group, right? There's no broad appeal Joe Rogan, and they talk about this all the time. There's no left-wing Joe Rogan except Joe Rogan from 5 years ago, right? I mean, it doesn't exist.
Right, and I'll say, like, there's a couple of YouTubers in that space, like Hassan, what's his Chank's nephew, Cenk Uygur's nephew.
Chank's nephew, yeah.
He's probably one of the biggest guys on the left as far as that, but he's way far to the left of most leftists. Like, but
yeah, he admits it.
But he's got that riz, he's got everything. So I think he's got a name for himself later, and like he's going to be influential for maybe for Newsom. But if you've got like other guys, I'm not even going to use their names. But yeah, you've got other gentlemen here, and they are out there, doing their thing, and they know how to maneuver the internet. They're not boomers, so yeah, it exists, and there's a demand for it. There's disingenuous David Pakmans of the world that will try to make shows, and they have viewers and stuff. Because people want to be validated, right? So people will log on to youtube.com and they'll search, what does Cenk Uygur's nephew think about this? And then if he says that what you need to feel, then you go, oh yes, that's good. I can actually feel like that. So same thing happens on the right to an extent, but with Joe Rogan, in my mind, like he's actually he is a centrist in my mind. Like he voted for Trump, he endorsed Trump, but that's the first Republican he's endorsed since I think ever. So this guy is like just a long form thinker, and like maybe he's not. Maybe you have your criticisms about Joe. And I'm going to call him back later, and we'll talk about details of setting up
Yeah.
that episode. But yeah, it's like it's for me. Joe is just like an embodiment of the people, and that's why last week I said, hey, Thomas Massey is the Joe Rogan of of the Congress. And we did get a hater comment that said, well, Joe Rogan is bald, bankrupt, etc. Not literally. That'd be funny if he said that, but he said some other stuff. But no,
Yeah.
you can double click on this. Joe Rogan really does represent the people because he has the most audience. He's got most people he makes people feel
Yeah.
like they're normal, right? When you have your friend, let's say you have
Right.
somebody let's say you have a kid, and your public school that your kid goes to is like, teaching your kid about LGBT stuff, and he's like fifth grade or whatever, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? And then your neighbor says, oh, you just need to relax. That's just progressive thinking. Like, you just don't be so bigoted. You just need to relax. Like, you're going to say, am I crazy? But then you listen to Joe Rogan, and he also is saying the same thing. Oh, I can't send my daughter to this school because they're doing this, that, and the other. You're like, oh, it's not just me. It's just Joe. And then you look at the comments on YouTube, which are the best source of truth in my mind. You see everyone saying, yeah, this is me too. Yeah, 100% this, so much this. And it's not Reddit, so it's not like they're astroturfing the comments to only be fitting the narrative. It's just the most popular comment. It's like actually a good way to check what the sentiment is. So you get a reality check and say, actually, no, my neighbor's the crazy one, and he or she is the one that's enforcing their crazy ideology on my kids. No, thank you. I'm moving to Austin, and I'm this and the other. So that's my rant on Joe Rogan. And again, we'll get back to him later. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, maybe if we decide. We haven't really, but yeah. So I want to refine my point I made a little bit, because you did kind of counter it well, gently, which I appreciate. But like, there are definitely like creators and personalities, if you will, that do sort of like long form. And I wasn't really thinking about streaming, but that is a good example. I mean, they literally talk for like 8 hours. But I guess the point that I want to make is like, the liberal ideology requires full buy-in, right? Like that's kind of what I mean by it's controlled, and that's why it works well for the corporate media formula, right? Where they just sort of talk for 2 minutes, because there's a drilled in talking point, you know what it is, right? And you're just going to say that thing, and this issue, you got that thing, and this issue. Now, if you dug into any one of those issues, if you really pushed against it, you're going to it's going to fall apart, because there's nothing really to it. But there is like a set list of beliefs that Democrats have to hold to. And if you don't believe me, look at what happened to Newsom, where he was doing his podcast, and he basically cut off the trannies, right? He basically said, yeah, we shouldn't be doing stuff. They cut them off, right? But anyway, they basically said they shouldn't be, the Democrats shouldn't be like, propping that up as much. And he got slaughtered for that, right? Like, among the Democrat base, because that's not on the approved list of things you're allowed to say, right? If you look at Hassan, he's further left in the sense that he's more thuggish, and I don't mean in like a cool way. I mean, he promotes violence, and he wants there to be like a revolution in the country. But other than that, he agrees with everything the Democrats say. The one point of disagreement he might have is on Israel, because that's the one thing you're safely allowed to disagree with the Democrat establishment on politically, is Israel. And that's only because they're bombing brown people. Let's be honest. If they were bombing any other country, you still wouldn't be able to criticize Israel. You're just allowed to do it because there's like a lower tier minority on the list of like, who do we care about the most? You got like the black transgender woman right at the top, right? And then below that, you got the global brown population, and then you got Jewish people, right? That's sort of the rough tier list of who they're allowed to care about. Right. So Jews are lower below, or Israel, I should say, not Jews. Israel is lower below the Browns, so they're allowed to criticize Israel. But anyway, the point I'm making is they stick to this list of talking points, and they can't move from it. And that's exactly why I think like this shift towards podcasting and actually reaching out and talking to a wide range of people, like you see Joe Rogan doing, is never going to work for the Democrats, because that's not part of their ideology. It's not part of their ideology to be open-minded and listen. That's not going to happen, right? So that's my prediction.
Well, and I like that, and I want to put a pin in something that you can maybe remind me of, and maybe we have to write this down because we never ever come back to things. Yeah. But it's going to be Jim. It's going to be Michael Bolton and Steelmanning him, right? So think about that for a second. Okay. We might not get to it, but think about that for a second, and that's where I go with this. The Democrat Party doesn't care about transgender folks. They don't care about same-sex marriage. They don't care about abortion. They actually don't care about that stuff. They know that stuff is a volatile, like for the one issue voters. They know that stuff plays, so they know they can separate themselves from the Republicans by saying, "Hey, let's do this because we want our people in power." But it's all the same power. All they want to do is enrich Lockheed, enrich Boeing, etc. And in my mind, that's the true ultimate goal, right? So the Democrats are going about it in a terrible way, and they don't know. They're not able to adapt and say, hey, the broccoli heads don't care about any of that crap. The 30-year-olds don't care about any of that crap. Anyone with kids is opposed to that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, where am I going with this? I'm going here. I'm going, the actual Hassans and stuff of the world, I know it's a common phrase, they are not like beholden to these, lobbyists and stuff. They're just saying, hey, this is my opinion. So you're right. The 2-hour, 4-hour podcast doesn't work for, hey, these are our advertisers, Pfizer, Lockheed Martin, Boeing. Let's talk good about them and make things go for good for them. That doesn't work for 2 hours, for 4 hours, because you get bored of that in 10 minutes or 10 seconds even. And nowadays, I think with especially with the TikTok brain rot, I would love to see like a Pfizer official TikTok ad, or like, I'm sure that exists, right? Like a Boeing, because you go to a hotel. Let's say you have to go to a wedding or something, so you're in the middle of Iowa, and you're in a hotel room or whatever. You turn on the TV and you see commercials, because you probably don't watch TV, right? But every time you're forced to, you turn on the TV and you see the commercial, and you're like, what? Every single ad is about erectile dysfunction or SSRIs or whatever. It's like, what the heck is going on here? So that's where the money goes. And it's like, imagine seeing they're gonna convert to TikTok and YouTube Shorts soon. I think they haven't already. So imagine watching a 5-second ad about Viagra or Cialis or Zoloft while you're watching your little brain rot. Like I don't think they're gonna be able to do that. It's like it's a different. I'm excited for the future, because that's the future looks bright in that way. You know what I mean? So
right. Yeah, I think that, like I said, I don't see that playing well for the Democrats. They're going to try it because they're out of ideas. I mean, it's so funny. Like when Newsom had Kirk on his podcast, he literally was like, "Tell us what to do. Like, Newsom is asking Charlie Kirk, what do we do? How do we fix this?"
No, literally, it was like.
And Kirk, I mean, smartly, Kirk is like, "I'm not going to tell you. Like, what do you mean I'm not going to?" But he also made the point too. He's like, "You can't do it. Because your idea, it's not a matter of, like, the way you give your message is how you have to give your message. There's no other way for you to do that. If you try to come to our arena and have debates and have open conversations, your ideology doesn't work for that. You can't. It's not compatible, right? Like, what you need to do, and he says, you need to get better ideas, right? And that's impossible. Under the current Democrat establishment and their movement, their way of being, it's impossible to do that. They have a coalition of special interests that if you cut one off, you're literally sacrificing votes. Every issue they compromise on, they're losing a huge percentage of the population. Imagine if, and they'll never do this because it's like one of the most popular ones, but imagine they compromise on abortion. Are you kidding me? That would obliterate the Democrat base. They can never, ever compromise on abortion, no matter what. That is stuck with that. And I think that the LGB thing is close too. I think the T is going to get cut off, because they have no choice. Like, I think that's the only route that they really have, because that's so ridiculous that we're teaching like a 5th grader about, trannyism. Like, that, you can't be doing that. Like, so they're going to have to cut that off. But the LGBT is going to stick around. I guarantee you.
And that's a lot more palatable. The LGBT is more palatable in a lot of ways, right? Like, I think there's infighting in that whole community. I'm not going to speak for the community because I'm not involved in it, but I do think there's infighting in that community. And I think you're right about the T's. Like, I've heard a lot of people say, hey, you're a little bit too out there with this. All I want to do is just, which we've already won our fight on this, which was I just want to be able to marry my friend, or my boyfriend or whatever. Right? And I've heard,
And you're ruining it.
Yeah, and you're ruining that. You're bringing light to an area where I don't think you're making it. You're loud. So you're right about that. And I think it's an untenable ideology when you have, in my mind, the result of the ideology is somebody in your life telling you, in a one-on-one conversation, in a skiff, if you will, literally, oh, don't say that, by the way. And then you question, wait a minute, are you telling me not to say something? We're in a skiff, dude. Like, I'm not offended. You're not offended. Why would you tell me that? Oh, because somebody that's hypothetically not here could be offended by what you're saying. So therefore, I have to stand up for that person. Dude, you don't believe in God, but you believe that somebody from a different world that's hypothetically doesn't exist can hear us talking about this? We're in a skiff, dude. See what I'm saying? Like, I'm sick of it. I'm actually so sick of it. So that's why, like, I'm crazy. Sort of being shunned from certain social events, because I'm no longer allowing that bullshit to just transpire. If somebody asks me to not say something, I'll double click and say, well, hang on a minute. Because you said it perfectly, and I'll reiterate. You said, it's always the people that are saying the truth or that are having the most free speech that are considered fascist, quote unquote, right? Look at communist China, look at North Korea. You can't speak freely there. And what are they? Are they not fascists? What's going on there?
Great question.
We don't live there,
Great
so
question.
I don't want you. You know who you are if you're listening, which you're not because you don't like this. But don't tell me what I can and can't say. You can do your own
Right.
caricature BS, but I'm not involved in that, and I'm going to question you in public if you push back on it. So there's that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, man, that was a good weave. I think we hammered that subject. I mean, in summary, the culture has left the Democrats. They are, and I really love it. I mean, I'm having a great time right now, like watching the Democrats, because I despise these people. I despise the liberal establishment. You know, I have my issues with the conservative establishment, definitely, but I absolutely hate the liberal establishment. I think that they are satanic, they're evil, they're corrupt, they're wicked people, and to see them just get whipped so hard, man, like election night 2024 was a great night, man. I look fondly back at that. I still enjoy watching like the highlight reels of like MSNBC slowly realizing
The live
that they're gonna
meltdowns.
lose. Yeah, and like Hassan melting down and Vosh melting. I still love
The
the
salt
Destiny.
mines.
Oh, that's a
Whoa,
good one.
we don't say his name, but yeah, the salt mines. The salt mines.
I love the salt mine. And I just love to see these people get whipped. I hope that they all, never get to make a comeback. I hope this ideology shatters into a million pieces and they have to come back with something actually respectable. Do I think that they're capable of doing that? Of course not. So I think that they're just going to kind of drive emotional sentiment even worse, and they're going to stoke violence, and they're going to become even more evil and disgusting. And it's going to cause a right-wing backlash against that. I mean, I'm blackpilling a little bit right now, but this is where I think the country is heading. But for now, I think that we're in a good moment, where it's still peaceful, and the right has power, and people who are actually men are taking control. It's good, but
No,
yeah,
I
that's
definitely
how I
agree.
feel
I
about
agree,
it. And
for sure.
yeah,
It's interesting because that doesn't really answer the question of where are they going to go with it, right? And that's not our answer. We don't need to answer that. But it's like that's a good thing to think about. Like, what are they going to do about this? They're in a situation where right now they've got no sentiment, and it's just going to get worse. And again, going back to the top down answer, yeah, I mean, like it all comes back to the way that the society has been built now. There's such a like I really believe that all the liberals of today are they only believe the things that they believe because at one point in time they needed to impress a woman. And I know it sounds like a little like reductionist view on it, but I'm asking in good faith, find a liberal that you know and think about why do they believe what they believe about abortion? Why do they believe what they believe about same-sex marriage? Why do they believe what they believe about Ukraine? Was it to impress a female, or was it to stand up for a woman, or like what was it for? And immigration as well. So it's like those are the four big issues with them, and it's like, I mean, you can't really get to where they get to with like with a bit bit of logic and reason. You get to it with emotion. I get that, and there's some wiggle room. Some of them get some parts of it right and a lot of it wrong, but I really don't believe it's organic. It's not something you're going to come to and think of like, hey, I care about this issue. And to cross examine that a little bit, to double click on Vivek, for example, the Federal Reserve is way more important in my mind than LGBT rights, and no one cares about that stuff because it's boring, it's dense on purpose. But I don't need to impress a female to talk about the Federal Reserve. They're not going to be impressed by that. They're just going to be, what are you talking about? I don't want to hear about that.
Yeah, they're not going to have any clue what you're talking about.
So
yeah.
I guess that's the key take home. If you find a woman that's impressed from you ranting about the Federal Reserve needing to be abolished and Jekyll Island and this, that, and the other, just put a ring on it. Put a ring on it and get in there.
Yeah, that's your wife right there for sure.
But yeah, let's get into JD.
But
Vance.
the thing, it's important that she doesn't know anything about it. You don't want to go too far. You don't want her educating you. That's a little like, all right, calm down.
Right,
like,
exactly.
But yeah, you want to be able to teach her. Yeah.
But go ahead, man. Go ahead. We'll talk about JD Vance. I think it's a perfect time to segue into it because he really is a champion of the right wing. I think right now, and he's really the future of the right wing. I feel so.
Yep, I agree. So I want to toot my own horn a little bit because nobody else is going to do it because we only have 25 subscribers.
27.
But basically 27. Okay, is it 20? Okay, we have, anyway. I need to toot my own horn and say, like, I mentioned the last time we talked about JD Vance, which must have been 2 episodes ago, that I think JD Vance is to the right of Trump on many of the issues that I care about. One being, of course, Israel. But I also said that I think he's much more reasonable and articulate than Trump ever has been or ever will be, and that's the main reason I like him. Well, I'm just going to call back to the first story we talked about today, which is the leaked signal messages. One of the messages we didn't talk about, but it does exist, and again, we can maybe put it up now. You can see that the only person in the group, so there's like there's 18 members of that chat. They're not all active, but there's 18 people there. The only person in the group who even pushes back against the idea of like, hey, why exactly are we doing this? Like, why is there military involvement against the Houthis to begin with? Is that really a good idea? Does this fit with Trump's messaging and what the base wants and why we're doing this? JD Vance is the only guy that actually came up and said that, which made me love the guy even more, because I think that my sentiment of him is right. And I think we're going to see that revealed more and more, that Vance is like the leader that I would like pick for myself. You know, like Trump is the guy I'm settling with. I like Trump. I do like him, but I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't have designed Trump in a laboratory, right? Whereas Vance, I honestly might have. Like, I don't know we'll learn more about him, and nobody's perfect. But in terms of just like being able to speak, being able to like really dig into the right, correct course of action and articulate it well. And even the way he pushes back, he's not being like a stick in the mud. Like, he's not banging his fist on the table and saying, hey, I need these things my way. He knows his place. He's not the number one guy. He's playing his role, which I want him to do. Like, right now, Trump is the leader, and Vance realizes that. And although he has disagreements with him, he's still willing to like fall in line in the hierarchy and say, hey, you're the leader. We're going to do whatever you say, but here's my opinion. That's the people that you want Trump surrounded by. Any leader, you want him surrounded by people who are just like that. Like, hey, I don't agree with you. Here's what I think, but whatever you say, we're going to do it. And we're a team, and we're going to do it together, right? Vance really impressed me there. And I also like the fact that he was openly praying for victory, right? But that's sort of my hyping Vance up right now. But what do you have to say about him? I mean, that's why I think he's the leader, the future leader of the Republican Party. And it's one of the main reasons why I do kind of hope that Trump sort of steps out of the way in 2028 and doesn't attempt a third term, because I want Vance to have 40 terms. You know what I mean? As of right now.
Right.
Anyway, maybe I'll change, but
right. And,
yeah.
and we can skip kind of the background, because we don't need to repeat like what Vance did growing up. Like, that's a boring thing.
Right.
I mean, we get it. That's part of the equation,
Right.
but I don't care about that. Honestly, I just don't. But you know, he had his thing, and you know, he did his little Peter Thiel stint, and you know, he was in the military as a journalist and etc. That's it. Well, that's all we're gonna say. But now, you know, he's vice president. He's doing his thing. And the thing I like about Vance is I didn't know much about Vance until they tried to smear him. And the things they tried to say about Vance, I was like, oh, I like that if he said that. But of course he didn't. Of course it was a smear, so he didn't really say that stuff. But then he leaned into it in some ways. So it's sort of like, yeah, okay. And let me just jump right into the meat and potatoes of this. Vance was criticized by Vox or what have you by saying, I'm going to get in trouble for this, quote, let's give votes to all the children in this country and give control of those votes to the parents. So what he's saying by that is he's really just voicing what I'm saying, is that it is a moral imperative that everyone has 2.1 kids, right? That's what I've been saying. I always agree. And so the anti-natalists of the world, they don't, in my mind, they shouldn't have any say in what society looks like, because they're not going to be around for the downfall of deficit spending, for the downfall of constant, you see what I'm saying, where I'm going with this? And Vance is the first politician that's kind of really said it out loud, the thing that I've been thinking about this. And I'm like, hey, and I'm not saying, hey, like, you have to have kids, you know, like this, that, and the other, but I like that rhetoric, though. I like that rhetoric of, hey, dude, have kids. Like, you start to have kids and do your thing and, like, make society better. So that's one thing I'll start with. And, you know, he's said a lot more. And he kind of, you know, allegedly made fun of somebody for being a childless cat lady. And I'm not going to name her name, but, you know, this and that and the other. But, you know, the smear attempt was pathetic. And I actually agreed with, I was hoping that it was real because they embellished his words on it. But, I mean, that's part A. I mean, he's farther to the right than most people in that aspect, which I have extreme right wing on that. So, yeah.
Right. Me too. Yeah, no, he's much closer to the average person. It's funny because I think that the current their current Republican establishment is not far right enough, even for the average American person, right? And I mean, you know, we can appeal to polling data, which would sort of contradict me there. But so here's why I'm saying what I'm saying, is that polling data is, I think, almost always misleading, especially when you poll on like certain issues, like the issue. So you might ask, for example, should the United States fund the Department of Education? Right. Okay. A very meaningless question to the average person, because the average person has no idea what the Department of Education even does. Actually, Tony and I were talking right before the podcast, like, do you even know what that department does? So we tried to look it up. and really, no, nobody really knows. There's not a clear. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Baked into the question is the Department of Education, just the name of it. It's like the U.S.
Yes,
aid.
exactly.
It's like, oh, we should fund that. Yeah, it's Department of Education. So education, yeah, we should fund that. Yeah, that's what you may think.
We should fund education. That in their heads, it's going to be we should fund education. Yeah. Without that, we won't have any education. Well, of course we need education. I believe in that. Oh, yeah. I support it. Like that. That's how the average person thinks about this. When Tony and I hear Department of Education, I'm not thinking without this we have no education. I'm thinking, yeah, this is probably some, a crock of shit like government agency with a stupid name. I can tell right off the bat the name is like red flags. Department of Education. Okay, so that means you probably make education worse in a number of ways.
Yeah.
I don't really know what that is, but I guarantee you're meddling. You've come up with stupid policies that hurt people, and I also know that our public schools are trash. So you're probably directly contributing to that. That's what I hear when I think Department of Education. And I guarantee you that getting rid of the Department of Education would not in any way negatively impact our ability to educate our students. In fact, I'm quite certain it would help a lot. So that's another story. But anyway, that's my attack on polling data. So I think that JD Vance, in terms of, and he'll prove this in my view, if 2028 comes and he's running, which I'm certain he will be, he'll prove this to the American people. And he sort of gave a flash of it during the vice presidential debates. He knows the average person's mind. Like he's really a very good representative of us just ideologically. And he'll be able to do the important thing that a politician is supposed to do, which is, here's a complicated problem. Let me simplify it to you, but not in a way that's like I'm lying or trying to lead you down a path. It's, here's the truth, right? Like, you may not understand that the Department of Education is a crock of shit. You may not know that. But let me try to explain to you in a smart way, in a way that's relevant to you, why it is and why we need to cut it. Nobody would be able to make a case like that better than JD Vance, right? And he can do that on almost any issue. I've heard him talk about anything. He's always doing that. He did it in the Signal group, right? He very clearly cuts to the heart of, this is my objection to this, and it's a smart objection, and it's one I agree with, and he explained it well, and he also was not combative about it. I think that's the most important thing about JD Vance, is whenever he talks about any problem, he's so reasonable. He's so like gentle about it and kind. Like, he's just like, hey, this is what I think, and he says something really smart, and he's like, and that's what we should be doing, right? But it's not combative, it's not mean, he's not a bully like Trump is, and I like Trump. I think it's funny that he's a bully, but JD Vance doesn't have that in him, and that's really just going to make him even more popular. So yeah, that's where I see him.
I agree 100% on that. And I think a lot of the smear campaign, again, like they try to smear him, and they can't, because he is not a bully. And he'll, I think, eventually get some of that into him when he needs to, because I don't think Trump was born a bully. I think the media pushed him so hard, not just the media, but when he was apprentice and before that even, you get this you just start to understand the complex of what the media really is, right? I think JD is relatively new to the spotlight, so he probably will get some fatigue at some point, but let's see how it goes. I'm excited for like that kind of smear campaign attempt, and he handled it well already. He handled it very gracefully, and like when he was pushed, he agreed to do interviews, and when he was pushed on this stuff, he just said, let's focus on the fact that all they're saying is that I'm weird, okay? They're not saying anything about my policies, which is a good thing, right? That means they have no argument against it, and I'm open to hearing it. And, he's this, that, and the other. So he's just intelligently dismantling left and right. And I've never heard him really have with a mishap. So excited to hear from him in the future. But it's really like kind of what you alluded to, is that he does have a lot from everybody. Like, a lot of people from any different camp kind of agrees with him in different ways, So even from other sides of aisles.
Yeah.
So he's bringing a lot of people together. And I think he's like, I wrote down some stuff that he was involved in the last 4 years as far as bills and proposals and stuff. So I'll just name them. We got the Protecting Children from Gender Transitions Act. I mean, the title alone is pretty good. Dismantle DEI Act. The Railway and Safety Act. I don't know anything about that, so I can't really talk about that. And then the Invent Here, Make Here Act. So that's probably that's more bringing manufacturing back to the United States. So all that's all he's been involved in before VP. So it's like, I mean, he's doing stuff that seems that's pretty good. So I mean, we can analyze all that stuff more in detail and really dive into it, but it's not really important. It's just something that I'm bringing up as what has he done before becoming VP, right? He's not nobody, so, and he's able to convince Trump to become his VP even after calling Trump Hitler. So it's like, the guy's got Riz.
That's interesting too.
He's literally Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, and that I think there's another reason why I feel very well connected to JD Vance in terms of like I feel like he represents me more than any other politician in my life, right? Maybe I used to feel that way about Obama, but and I think at the time he did represent me. I've changed my mind on all that, but at the time he did. But JD Vance is much closer to me in age. He's like 40 years old, right? So he feels like he doesn't have that boomer tint. Like everything Trump does is like a boomer, even the way he tweets and the way he writes, and the way he talks. He's just like he's different from me, right? And I still like him, but he's like grandpa. Where JD Vance is more like somebody I'd be friends with, right? JD Vance is somebody that I get in a skiff with and say everything I want to say, and he would, even if he didn't agree with me, we could have
He'd
a
vibe
talk.
with you.
And
He'd vibe with you for sure.
He'd vibe with me, and it'd be a good, useful conversation, right? And it'd be awesome. So I think he has that going for him. There's something else I wanted to mention
Yeah,
here.
the Munich Security Conference, like the way he dismantled the EU.
Yeah,
just that was based, and
that was great.
And even based is a term that's allegedly like that's something you're not supposed to even say anymore. I guess that's.
Is that banned?
I don't think it's banned. I got pushback on it from an individual, but saying that's a white person thing to say. I'm like, okay, well, I'm white, so I'm saying it, but I don't know, but whatever. It's incredibly based.
It's based. Is it? You're saying it's based to be white? Wow.
No. That's not. No. Are you teasing the individual or?
That's. Yeah, I'm teasing that
gotcha,
individual.
gotcha.
It
was just an interesting thing. He just brought up my white. By the way, my whiteness has been brought up like recently on a few different occasions that on my mind.
You're being noticed.
I don't know. It's like I always think like, and this may be like out of scope here, but we talked about this last 2 weeks ago, and I think it's interesting that people bring up race, and it's like people don't bring up race of anybody except whites around me, and I'm not sure why. As somebody who's I am like married to a Chinese person, so it's like. I don't understand why that's being brought up all the time. I'm not the one bringing it up, but anyway, back to this.
Yeah,
Vance
it
is
could be
white.
The mustache.
It could be.
Yeah.
Vance blasted.
That's white coded. Yeah.
Vance blasted the European leaders with civilizational suicide via open borders, censored speech, etc. And you documented that pretty well. And I think when that thing dropped, you and I were both like, okay, well, it's another big moment for Vance. I mean, talk about that.
Well, yeah. And that was not long. Was it? I think that was right before the Oval Office thing with Zelensky, right? So he had already gone to Europe and like slapped him around. And honestly, man, maybe we could even talk about Europe at some point, but it's a disaster, bro. Like in my view, like the UK, France, Germany, these countries are lost, man. Like Ireland, how are they going to overcome? Like, if you think that it was bad to be a conservative from like 2020 to 2024 in the United States, they're literally getting thrown in jail in Ireland for like pointing out who's going around and grooming and raping like minors in their communities. Like just posting about it on X and saying nothing else about it, but just saying this is who did this and it's proven in law in the court of law, you'll get thrown in jail because you're inciting violence against immigrants, right? Like the Europe is so screwed. Like their free speech is non-existent. That's one thing too about the United States that everybody watching should hopefully understand. Other countries don't have the guarantee of freedom of speech that we have. The fact that it's enshrined in the Constitution means it can never really be taken away from us. Bro, they don't have that in other countries. Like they literally just don't have free speech. Like they'll just decide that something is illegal to say and you'll get thrown in jail for saying it. And they exercise that control to keep their liberal ideology in power. That's why they have a far worse problem with immigration. And really the types of immigrants that they're getting are also far worse, to be honest with you. Like they're much more likely to be Islamic militants who are just taking over their country and they're letting it happen. The most popular baby name in the United Kingdom in London, and this has been true for a long time, is Mohammed. That's been the case for like 8 years. It's been a long time that's been true. Their country is falling apart, and I don't really see any way to save it. I mean, I don't live there, so I'm not privy to all the details on the ground, but just as an outside observer, it's a disaster. And JD Vance went there and he pointed it out to him. He's like, hey, you guys are fucking up big time, man. Like the censorship laws that you're doing, and even just look at economically, Europe doesn't produce anything anymore. They don't build any companies. What's the last big European company that was founded and got big? I mean,
BMW?
They don't have any. I mean, yeah, what was that, like in the 40s? You know? Like, I mean, you could name a few, but I mean, think about the United States: Apple, Microsoft, you know,
Apple's an
Tesla,
Irish
X.
company,
I mean,
bro. Don't you know?
no, I don't know what you mean
It's
by that.
Ireland
No.
is it's a little tangent here, but Ireland is one of the highest GDP per capita countries, only because are sort of a tax haven for Apple, literally. So
Okay,
it's kind
I
of a
didn't know
weird
that.
little.
Yeah,
It's you can look into
interesting.
it. It's freaking
Yeah.
it's hilarious actually, but yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, yeah. But oh yeah, another interesting thing on that is like Conor McGregor. You know who that is, the
Yeah,
UFC
yeah,
guy.
of course I know.
Yeah, he's being charged now by the Irish government for inciting hatred against immigrants, and it's because he's decided to run for president, and he's obviously on an anti-immigrant platform. So they're trying to throw him in prison for something he said on X in like 2023.
That's funny.
Right? This is how these countries operate, man. Like they're really scary, honestly. Like
And that's why it's really important for
it's
you to not
scary.
just fall a victim to that and let that happen here. I mean, we have the Patriot
Yeah,
Act, right? That's an infringement of free speech. We have, what we were
yeah,
talking about
yeah.
earlier. We have like the ICE situation. I mean, that's not free speech, but that's in the same realm, right? And when your cousin is
Right.
at your birthday party and telling you, hey, don't say this or that, push back, and tell them to f off, and just tell them to get like less sensitive. Like people need to be way less sensitive. Jokes are fine.
Oh
Everything's
yeah,
fine. Sticks and
yeah.
stones, etc. Like bring that back. I don't care if it's not inciting violence unless you literally say, "Hey, hurt this person," which I get it. Don't say that, but
Right.
and don't do that. But say everything else. Say all your gamer words. Stop. Don't worry about anybody feeling bad about that crap. Like, don't let people could
Right.
cancel you over that. Like, just be
Yeah.
be provocative. I know it's kind of crazy, but like, just be yourself is what I'm saying. Don't go crazy edgy with it, but
Yes.
don't let your neighbor tell you don't say something. Like, that's ridiculous, dude. That's the
Yeah.
beauty of
Yeah.
America is we got guns and we got free speech. And I was talking to somebody about this earlier. They were saying, hey, my country has morality. We impose it on each other in the form of social kind of behaviors. That's how we do it. You guys don't do that. What are you guys known for? And I told them, hey, we're known for guns and free speech. We have guns so we can protect what we say.
That's right.
So get that out there. Get
That's
yourself,
right.
arm yourself with free speech and arm yourself with Colt 22s, etc. What have you. So,
Armed and dangerous. You know.
but yeah, circling back
Yeah.
to you. Sorry about that cutoff, but
No, that's all I wanted. I mean, I was just talking about JD Vance going to Europe and really being willing to stand up in front of all those European leaders and tell them straight to their face. And I think it's very important because one other point I want to make here is, as I said, they have the same issue with immigration in Europe, but in my view, it's far worse because the immigrants we could hear are like, Pablito and his dad coming across the border from South America, and often they are, maybe not Pablito because he's a good kid. He's in the wrong country, but he's a good kid. But all the other ones that come across, many of the ones that come across the border, like gang members and stuff, not great. I mean, we don't want them here, and they need to be deported. But they're not like Islamic militants from the Middle East who are like members of ISIS who are totally dedicated to dismantling Western civilization, right? That's far worse, and that's who they're dealing with in Europe. That's who's coming across the border in droves, is like military-aged males from these Islamic countries who
right.
their stated goals are to erase Christianity and implement Islam and Sharia law in these countries. And they're succeeding because those countries are just letting it happen, right? They're just allowing this in there. And the reason this is a big deal, and I'm glad that JD Vance went there and like was willing to say this, is because these are our supposed allies, right? These are our European allies that we're supposed to be friendly with and be willing to go to war with, etc. Well, if this continues, in 20 years, these are going to be Islamic republics run by extremist radical Muslims with nuclear weapons, right? Like that's what's going on. Like that's the path we're heading down. This is a serious problem. And I'm glad that we have an American leader who is actually willing to stand up, and we have to be the leaders. Europe is not, I'm going to feel free to disparage Europe a little bit here. Hopefully none of my audience, our audience is too European. Your countries are weak, and compared to the United States, I mean, you have nothing going for you. And you really depend on the United States for security. And it's up to us to be like your leaders. And really, it's sad that we have to do this because you should be capable of doing this on your own, but you're clearly not. So we sort of have to go there and like shake you by the collar and get you back in line. And I'm glad we have a leader like JD Vance and with Donald Trump's support, who's willing to go there and actually do this. Because, man, I really worry about Europe, bro. Like I worry about a radical Islamic country with nuclear weapons. Like that's the worst nightmare to me, in terms of global security.
Right. And I'm not afraid of that as much as you are, I guess, but they're what I do fear is that people, and maybe I should be, but I don't know. So a part of me thinks that that's potentially an Israel talking point, but we can get there later. But the thing is, what I'm thinking is I'm thinking about the grape issue, like, and I have to use that word because I'm not supposed to say the real word on YouTube. Of Sweden, for example, you look at the crime statistics, and their grapes have gone up by a lot, and a lot of it is because of what you said, like the culture of the people that they're letting in. They don't view the age of consent as a real thing, and this is maybe that's informed by religion, but a lot of it's also informed by just their culture, and so they go in there and they commit these grapes, etc., and then you got an issue. So it's like, I mean, some of them are good people, right? That's the phrase, the common phrase. Some are good people, but like in this case, I don't know. We're talking about a situation where their cultures just literally don't assimilate to, the Swedish culture or whatever. So it's like, why feel bad for saying, hey, like, are you being jailed for saying, hey, let's stop it, like allowing illegal Muslims or whatever, illegal terrorists into the country. I mean, maybe you're not literally saying that. Maybe you're saying it in a different way that's less palatable. But I don't know. I mean, Poland did it right. Again, we talked about that guy, but I don't know, the way he does it is a better way of doing it.
And you shouldn't have to be palatable with something like that, right? Like, I agree with you. Like, I guess you got to say it how you got to say it to not get thrown in jail. But what I'm saying is, like, ideally, you can just voice your opinion. Why am I required to be okay with this or even gently push back? Like, I hate that idea. And just to go a little further, like these people that are coming in, like these extremist Muslims, again, they're not all bad people, but the extremist Muslims, the ones that are coming across with this specific ideology, it's not just that they, aren't going to assimilate because you're not doing a good enough job to help them assimilate. Their ideology forces them not to assimilate. Actually, it forces them to assimilate you, right? That's actually the whole point of their religion. And to be fair, Christianity believes this too. Like, we want to assimilate everybody into Christianity, but we do it in a much more gentle way. Like, we're just kind of like, hey, it's awesome, you should join, right? Islam does not have that approach to it. It's more like, if you agree with us, great. If not, you actually deserve to die, right? And this comes directly from their holy text. So,
no, I mean, literally, like
that's who you're letting in.
Yeah, that's what they say. They say, age of consent, etc., and then like the apostasy thing is. But again, you mentioned the Christians, and again, Christianity. Yeah, if you're talking about it in good faith, literally, and you're saying Christianity wants people to assimilate to Christianity, sure, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're talking about. When you say Christianity wants to assimilate, you're talking about the term Judeo-Christianity, which doesn't exist, but it's a term that people use and say, hey, like, we should all assimilate and do this and that and the other, and they're being co-opted, like we talked about, with Thomas Massey exposing this, is that now you're being trained to religiously believe that you need to financially support a country, not a religion, but a country. Right. But your Bible is telling you to support a country. So it's like, what country is that? We all know. So it's like, you got a situation from my perspective where I don't want people to tell me to assimilate to Christianity because I know that's a dog whistle for, so you should be financially supporting Israel. And I'm thinking, hey, dude, I know my moral system. I'm cool with it. Like, I've got my own situation with God or what have you. I don't need you to tell me, from a dispatch view, you know what I mean by that, I'm involved in this, that, and the other. And like, you're telling me the holy word. Just like I don't want, Muhammad, as you mentioned, to tell me, hey, you need to understand the prophet is this, that, and the other. And then I don't want, somebody from the Hindu religion tell me you have to do this. I don't care. Just I've read enough to know. You're all telling me the different version of what the truth is. I don't want to assimilate to what you're doing. My religion in America, not religion, calling it that, is freedom of speech, free guns, gun ownership. So it's like, start with those two as the first principles, and then we all live here. Now, we can get into a debate if Christian nationalism is better than, libertarianism, whatever. We can get into that debate. But for now, I'm just saying, like, the way we're different from Europe, and this is what you're saying too, I think, is that we have freedom of speech, and we have right to bear arms. And for you to come here and say, hey, I'm going to vote against that stuff. Like, I'm actually going to come to your country illegally and then become legal and then vote against that stuff because the Democrat Party lets me come into the country. Yeah, that's not American. That doesn't fly with me. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm at with that. And I think that's that's not what's happening in Europe. It's way worse in Europe. It's a different thing, and that's what you're shining light on. So it's two unique issues, and I think it's interesting that people aren't willing to talk about this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and it is interesting that, we both, Europe, the United States, and it would make sense because we're very similar culturally, but with major differences, that we both are encountering the same let's call it like a globalist takeover, and we're both encountering sort of very similar problems. It almost seems a little unlikely that that would happen by accident, right? But who am I to say? But it's interesting that we both encounter these issues, and like you said, I think the United States, by virtue of the way our country has been set up, is much more resilient, and I think we actually can overcome it. I think we're in the process of overcoming it right now. Europe does not have that safety net. They've sort of, even if you think about the fact that they've got the European Union and they all have the same currency, like they're sort of stuck, man. Like I don't know much about European politics and sort of like the mechanics of how they're going to get out of this, or what the conservatives are trying to do there. I really don't know. They can't win elections, like, and I don't mean can't as in they can't get the votes. They're not allowed to win elections. Like if you look at, there was a Germany election a few months ago, and the party that got this, it was either the first or the second, in terms of how they finished in the polling. Yep. But they had a massive share of the vote, and it's the quote unquote far right party, AFD, right? Yep. They weren't allowed to take power because of the way their system is set up. Is that even though they finished with like a huge share of the votes, every other party has already decided that they're far right Nazi fascists who are not allowed to take power. So all of them are going to form a coalition, and even though they got less votes on an individual basis, together they have like 70% of the vote. And even though they disagree with each other on a million different things, the one thing they do agree on is that they can't allow the AfD to take power, so they just won't allow it. They just won't allow that to happen. So the only way that the AfD could ever win in Germany is by becoming like a 50% plus party, which doesn't happen in German politics. They have like 30 parties, so nobody's ever going to win that many, votes just for one party. So they're literally not allowed to take power. Anyway, I don't know how they're going to get out of it. I'm glad we don't have that issue here.
Well, we have somewhat of
there's one thing I wanted.
I was going to say we have somewhat
one
of an
brief
issue.
point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, one brief point I want to make, because you mentioned like the Christian support for Israel. I just want to quickly push back against this. Okay, that is a false teaching, which was invented in the early 20th century. This thing called dispensationalism, and I'm only making this point because I don't want people watching to think that like I'm a Christian or that this is even actually a Christian view. It's a lie. And anybody who comes to you and says that like the Bible says that we should support Israel, they are a grifting liar, and at best, and at worst, they are like a pawn of the devil, right? Like they're preaching a lie that actually directly contradicts the Christian faith, and they are misleading you. So anybody who ever says that, you can safely write them off. Unfortunately, this encompasses a ton of like evangelical Christians in the United States. But they're liars, and that's not true. So it's not a Christian viewpoint to support Israel.
And the reason I brought that up is because many people that I know in my life will tell me that because they're Protestant or they're evangelical or what have you, and they'll say, "Hey, you have to because this is the text and this and that and the other," and they actually, to me, they're like robots. They're not. It's so weird to me. Like they actually are like robots to me. And whereas like all the Orthodox and the Catholics that I've ever talked to, they always tell me, "No, that's BS. Like I don't know what that is." Like, it's one.
Yeah, that's a lie.
But either way, I don't want to hear that BS. And like a lot of it's that's a lot of like a lot of the Zionists in Congress believe that. So it's kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they do. And they've all been co-opted by this lie. Again, Christianity dates back 2,000 years, and this ideology, this view, this talking point was concocted in 1911, right? So for 1900 years, not a single Christian in the entire world believed that we were supposed to support a quote-unquote state of Israel, which to that point never existed. And then in the 1900s, they come up with this idea, basically out of thin air. And it's a filthy lie, and I actually really despise it. Not you for saying it, but just anybody who would take the Bible and literally preach the opposite. I mean, and it's a theological conversation we don't have to get deep into, but I just want to make it clear to anybody watching that anybody who says that the Bible forces you to support Israel is directly contradicting the fundamental basis of Christianity. It's not even like there's a small disagreement. They are completely cutting off the power of God according to the story of the Bible. They don't believe in God anymore, basically. I mean, it's a complete inversion. So I just want to make that point clear to anybody watching. But Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again,
So
we definitely could talk about that in more detail another time. But I brought that up because that's my experience with a lot of Protestants and evangelicals in America, at least. And that's why I brought that up.
yeah, yeah,
You know, I think the minority of Christians maybe are Orthodox or Catholic or more strict on this in the United States. But I don't know for sure.
yeah,
I don't know the
yeah,
numbers. But yeah, I mean, no. Going back to, and again, circling back to something we put a pin in, and that was Steelmanning Michael Bolton, and is that
yeah,
he I think what he's trying to do, if Steelman, is trying to make America rich, and that's all the petrol dollar, all this stuff that's like, you know, foreign policy related, and like, you know, getting oil from different countries and doing this and that and the other and being able to sanction, and like there's I believe it's called SWIFT, a lot of like technology that's based because we have so much like interventionalism going on. It enriches
yeah.
the United States, but the question is, who does it enrich in the United States? And just because we're that rich, does that mean everyone's affected by it positively? Maybe it does. Some argue, right? Some argue. So that's my steelman of Michael Bolton. He's a psychopath, though, but that would be the case. I don't know why I brought that up, but I remember we put a pin in that, and I was bringing that back.
You
up
did.
later.
I was gonna bring that up to let you do that because I didn't know what you're talking about. But okay, I'm glad.
So I weaved back in there. I guess. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I'm not familiar with it, honestly. I don't really have.
Well, I mean, in general, like,
also,
what's a steelman of why are we interventionalists? You know what I mean? Other than like, without invoking the military industrial complex and the oligarchy, like, does it benefit the American people to be, if you lean into the truth, to be enriching those companies?
Yeah. It is tough, you know.
Like, are you paying less for gas because we're bombing people in Gaza, or what?
not Gaza, right? But
you know,
in fact, yeah, no, but it's not as though we have a coherent interventionist policy. I don't really think we do, right? Like it's sort of like
purpose, that's on purpose.
Yeah, yeah. Like if let's say we did, then yes, honestly. Like let's say we had like an actual continuous government for like 20 years, and they were able to implement like long-term interventionalist strategies, then yeah, theoretically that could be great for us, right? Like we could target specific objectives over long periods of time and not contradict ourselves every 4 years and actually achieve things that benefit the American people and maybe even benefit the world, right? But we're not capable of doing that because of the way our system is set up. So in general, I favor less interventionalism. America first, right? That's one of the reasons I voted for Trump. Is I really would, what I would love to see is like a complete contraction of all of our foreign policy, like just for a few years at least. Let's just
that's anti-Semitic.
Stop. Well, I'm willing to be that if that's what that is, right? Like if you're going to call me that for, you know, like just stop for a while. Just stop, cut it off. Just give it a rest. Like let the world deal with their own problems for a while we fix our own. And maybe when we're a little stable, we can sort of look at, you know, who needs help, help. Who needs to be invaded for oil and stuff like that. We can sort of think about that down the line. But yeah, in general, I do favor, obviously I favor quite a lot less interventionalism. Right. But
no, me too. I was just posed that question because I'm thinking like, yeah, maybe it's not all about, Boeing and Lockheed. Maybe that's part of it, but maybe there's also something to these people really believe there's some kind of like benefit to be had by just putting their foot in the water. You know what I mean? And I think as a person who is not a psychopath, I always view it as, hey, there's just too many lives that are going to get lost here. Like, why are we doing any of this crap on both sides? Like, Why are we invading Iraq? Like, why are we doing that? I was told because, Bin Laden, this, that, and the other, but he's from Afghanistan. So as a 13-year-old boy, I'm thinking, why are we in Iraq? I'm playing Conflict Desert Storm on my PS2 and I'm emulating like bloodthirsty missions. Like it's a warmongering complex. You know what I mean? And it's like, you bring that into later on and you say, why are we in Syria? Why are we in Lebanon? Why are we in Yemen? Why are we in Somalia? Like, what are we doing, over here and this, that, and the other? And it's like, you start to question, I don't think that helps me individually, but am I naive to think, I guess that's the question. Am I naive to think that, or am I actually benefiting from that in the form of, I'm paying a lot less money for gas. I'm paying, less money for this, that, and the other. Like, and that's because remember what that guy said on, what about the jobs? So, like, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's also inarguably true that like if we do destabilize other countries, that they'll never be strong enough to oppose us, right? I mean, that is true. It's dark. It's a dark thought, but honestly, yes. I mean, if we want to remain the most powerful country in the world, where we're safe and secure, and we sort of get our way and do whatever we want, then in a Steelmanning way, and I don't necessarily advocate for it, but that would be the point, is like, I'm not in principle opposed to interventionalism for exactly this reason, right? I'm opposed to the way our government does it because I think it's necessarily incoherent and they screw it up all the time. But in principle, I don't really have an issue. We talked about that. Might makes right, right? Like we kind of get our way. Like if we're the most powerful, and we should not be going around like slaughtering innocent people. I mean, definitely not. But if a government doesn't want to play nice with us, and and they have something we very much decide that we need, then maybe we can sort of pull some strings and get it done. Like that. I'm not in principle opposed to that. It's just
No, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat. We might be able to do like almost a mini episode on it, but I think basically for today, I think we've covered a lot. And I'm curious to ask you, do you think there's anything else we should touch base on before we wrap it up, or what do you think?
No, I think we should probably cut it off there. 2 hours. So really good conversation.
Yeah, man. All right, well, guys, thanks for checking out the video. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll comment on the video if you disagree, and we'll have a dialogue back and forth. We're excited for that. And next week we'll be back at you with another full episode. So check out the clips, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching, guys.